I like
That's fair.
Spotify.
This podcast sponsored by
Yeah.
Spotify.
We wish.
I will say that the Spotify like playlist thing, it actually shows the unique episode covers, and Apple, I cannot figure out how to get that for the Apple podcast one. So I'm team Spotify for podcasts. Because I tried to Google, I don't know, Fated Mates, theirs change. Like, I don't know. It's like, go into your RSS feed and change the tag. I'm like, what? How do I get it? I don't know. So I refuse at this point.
That's too much. I will say, I used the free version of Spotify for many, many years because I'm one of those people that's like, why would I pay for something when I can get along just fine without paying for it?
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I used the free version of Canva up until like really I started with my internship and was using the pro version of Canva like with their login, and I was like, this is magical and I need this in my life. And what finally got me was that free Spotify, I think you can't download your music. Like it's all streaming on Wi-Fi. And I was studying abroad in Italy, and I would be like on a bus in the Italian countryside, like going, so obviously you can't stream music, and I was like, this is hell. And I literally on the bus like paid for Spotify and was like, fine, I just want to be able to listen to music.
Because then you also couldn't like select the song you wanted to listen to.
No, you have
to
like
shuffle it, and that because you can do it on your laptop, and so like that's how I went through college, and then like a little bit after that, I just got the one because I had a lot of music on my phone, and then through either not syncing or whatever, it all got deleted, and so then I was like, okay, I just need to have Spotify, and there's so much freedom with it. My parents still don't quite understand like Spotify, Apple Music. They're like, I can't listen to this. I'm like, but if you had that, you could. But
my dad has a YouTube playlist that he uses while he's at work, that he just like of all of the songs, just so many songs, and he just listens to his YouTube playlist, and I'm like, that works for intriguing. You. I, however, will not be listening to YouTube.
I do have a YouTube playlist. It's called No Downloads, and it's mostly songs that I can't buy on iTunes.
That's fair.
But I have some that just, because I haven't had a working Apple ID for 6 months, so it's literally been anything I want to listen to. Until I finally got off my ass and took 10 minutes to set up an Apple ID. It was not hard. But yeah, no, that's the big thing. I can't do free Spotify because it doesn't let me. You've got like a limit. You can only skip like 6 songs in an hour or something. And it brings me back to that other
Pandora
service that had the
Pandora
blue thing.
Yep.
Yes.
Pandora.
And so anyway, I
was a
need
wild
to get
time.
it, but
Pandora was a wild time. I will say I was always a music shuffler. Like, I will only sit down and listen to an album in order, like, right when it comes out, if I just want to listen to it. Or if it's, like, if I'm going to just listen to an album, I'll listen to it in order. But 99% of my music listening is playlists that I shuffle. I very rarely have a playlist that I listen to in order. So, like, Spotify worked for a while, because I was going to shuffle it anyway. But the only so many skips and the not being able to like listen offline, that was
yeah.
And now I'm like, well, I can never not have Spotify.
Yeah, you can never go back once they get you, and that's my thing. Is I'm like, what if it gets? I'm like a conspiracy theorist where I'm like, what if it gets deleted? At least like I own my music, but also like it's my. So I'm like, I have it. Like it's my. Even though Apple could also die. Like I don't know why I think Spotify is less of a real thing, but I don't trust the online music.
That's how you turn into somebody who only listens to CDs. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then cars are going away from CDs, so then it's super hard to listen to them anyway.
Right? Yeah. It's a whole mess.
The like owning the hard cover or hard copy or whatever is number one why I've ended up with so many books, because I just like I need the physical copy if it's a book that I like. Even if it's not one that I reread a ton, I'm still like, I need it, because what if it's not on the internet? Like I need, but like my dad is like that. He has a library, so of course he is. He's also like maybe a little bit of a hoarder, and it drives my mom crazy. But he very much forever has been like, if you like something, if you like a movie, don't rely on streaming. You better buy the DVD. If you like a book, make sure you buy the physical copy, because you never know. What if the internet disappears or something? I don't know what his logic is, but I mean, it could.
Well, not to be that person, but I tried to order a physical copy of That Time I Got Drunk and Yeeted a Love Potion at a Werewolf because I want it.
Sure.
And it got lost. Like, I don't know what happened, but it didn't get to me. And so I tried to buy a replacement copy, and they're not available anymore. So, like, you really never know. I think the series got picked up by a traditional publisher.
Yeah.
So if you want physical copies, it's not going to be until February of next year. And I've literally been craving nothing but this book for the last month. So I'm hoping that some miracle will happen and my package will get shipped. But I'm thinking, like, it's been pulled. Like, they can't send me a replacement because they're print on demand. So seriously, if you see something you want, buy the physical copy because you may never get it again, which is dramatic. I'll wait until February, but there we are.
Is it like online anywhere, like used to sell?
It doesn't look like it. I've tried looking it up, like like the title, physical book, thrift, whatever, and nothing's really coming up.
That's really depressing.
But it's literally, I think it's been within the last week. Sorry, what was that?
Oh, I was just saying, like, probably it's not one that a ton of people bought physical copies of, so probably not a ton are selling it. I did see Kimberly Lemming made a TikTok where she was like, I saw somebody selling a hard copy of this book for like $100 or something because they pulled it. You won't get it with that cover anymore. And she was like, guys, my book is not worth $100. Do not let someone scam you into this.
She kills me. I actually DM'd her. I don't think I'll get a response, which is totally fine. But I DM'd her and I was like, here's the situation. Is there anywhere I can get a physical copy? I'm like, by no means, I'm not asking for it, but I'm just like, if you happen to know that a certain retailer still has it, or if you know that they had like a limited amount of physical stock, because I think with the retailer I was trying to buy it through and with Amazon, it's print on demand.
Right.
So I was like, if you know anybody who has it, please let me know. I want to read it so bad. But like, I have a Kindle, but it's literally 9 years old and I'm too lazy to set it up. Or do I have a Kobo? Which one is Amazon's?
Amazon's
Kindle. You could do your Kindle app on your phone.
And I have a Kobo. I have a Kobo, and it's 8 years old, 9 years old, and I think it still charges, but I haven't touched it, so I don't really do like ebooks. And I have the first one in physical, so I'm like, I'll just wait until February and just be sad.
I mean, you could do, like Hannah said, if you get the Kindle app on your phone, you could read it.
Yeah,
I could do that.
Yeah, I'm assuming
it's not great.
I hope they're still selling the ebook.
Yes, the ebook is still available.
Yeah,
in theory, I could do that. And I could read the third one then.
Yeah, I don't love reading ebooks on my phone, but if it's like, it's what you gotta do. Sometimes it's what, like, I don't have a Kobo, so any ebooks that I get on Kobo, I have to read on my phone.
Yeah, that's what I find with NetGalley ARCs too. I have to read them on my phone, and it majorly impacts my enjoyment of the book. So whenever I try to review things, I'm always like, I cannot speak to pacing at all because I read this over the span of 60 days. So like, I can't tell you if it's at all well paced. I did that with The Secret Lives of Country Gentlemen, and I loved it so much that I'm like, I do need a physical copy of this book, which has also been lost in the mail, by the way. The 2 books I ordered, but it's fine. But in my review, I was like, I literally read it during my 2-minute breaks at the gym. Like, I would go with my partner, it would be my set, and then while it was his set, I would read 3 pages. Like, so I can't speak to pacing, but I really enjoyed the vibes of the book.
NetGalley is why I ended up getting a Kindle. Like, I got tired of reading it on my phone and was like, here we are. I mean, it was like a graduation present, but...
Yeah, I used to not be an ebook person, and then I like forced myself to with NetGalley and just like stuff I could get from the library that didn't have audiobooks and everything, because like my Libby app can then send to Kindle. But at the beginning I was staunchly against it.
I was too, and now I can't read physical books.
Yeah, it's bad.
I own this Kobo, and it's again, it's very, very old. I have no idea if it'll work, but I own it. So I'm like, especially for library books, if you're going on a trip, if you have these arcs, like I would rather read it on something like that because I know they're designed to like, there's no glare and all that fun stuff. And I hate reading on my phone. Like I violently hate it. But I've just been too lazy to set it up. It's back there somewhere. I just don't feel like touching it.
I feel that.
Yeah.
So welcome to Romance Your TBR.
Thank you.
if you're hearing a third voice
again,
that's because we have a very special guest, the lovely, wonderful Megan. I'm Caroline. Hannah.
I'm Hannah. Thank you,
Megan. We almost never introduce ourselves. We forget it every episode. Nice. So it's exciting if we manage to remember to say the name of the podcast and ourselves. And this is our lovely guest, Megan. Do you want to introduce yourself? Tell the listeners a little something about you, where to find you, etc.
Sure. Hi, I'm Megan. I'm at Meg_Mazzaferro on Instagram and TikTok. I make bookish content and I try to take aesthetic photos. It doesn't always work. But I read a lot of YA fantasy, and since befriending Caroline a couple years ago, I've been really getting into historical romance. It kind of comes and goes in waves, but it's always like such a fun thing to read. And so because we've talked about the Dangerous Damsels series before, so with Secret Service of Tea and Treason coming out, I was like, okay, can we please talk about this again? Because I had a lot of fun last time. And then Caroline was like, oh my God, you should come on the podcast. I'm like, oh my God, a podcast? Like, that's so official. That's so fancy. So
we
here I am.
are neither official nor fancy.
Because you guys did a TikTok live, right?
Yeah, we did a couple. We did a read-along for both the Wisteria Society and the League of Gentlewomen Witches. And we did a little read-along and then did a live at the end of each for each of those books. Fun. And that was when Gentlewomen Witches was coming out.
Yes, it was a ton of fun.
Yes. And then, so we're going to also do one to talk about Tea and Treason at the end of this month. We just haven't decided.
Yeah, I was going to say, zero plans have been made to coordinate that, but it will be happening at some point.
It might just be like the day before. We're like, hey, what if we did this tomorrow?
Hey, do you want to go live tomorrow?
So
that works.
We'll find out. We'll post about it. Yeah. But I figured this way, people who can't join the live can still hear what we have to say, which I know we got a couple of comments on the lives of people, or afterwards, of people being like, I couldn't join, and it's not like with Instagram Live where there's a recording of it. No, it just
it does kind of the ether. Yeah, like sometimes you get a notification that you can access your live afterwards, but it depends. If we're doing like a group one, I don't think there have been a couple of times I've gone live to write, and it's literally just me sitting in silence typing on my laptop for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And then they're like, here you go, in case you want to edit this into something. I'm like, I don't know what you want me to do with that. But I think when there's two hosts, it becomes a little bit more complicated.
Yeah, because I know with TikTok, like, if you join a live, you join with, like, the person that you're following or the person whose live you clicked on, so you can't, like, see, like, I couldn't see your followers commenting on the live and vice versa. Yeah, it's a very weird,
like, it's a little messy. Maybe we do it on Instagram this time. Who knows?
We could.
We'll figure it out. We'll coordinate the night before.
It'll be like a sudden drop.
Surprise launch. Yeah.
Anyway, so the Secret Service of Tea and Treason, the one and only, from the one and only India Holton, one of my favorite people.
I adore her, like, so much.
I know.
I would die for her.
I'll never forget the experience of reading book one. I got the arc and I don't remember signing up for it. It was just sent to me in my email before, like, I had any followers or anything, and I had not heard anything about this book. I don't know how I got it. And I started it and I was so confused, but it was the best time ever. And I was like one of, I think, her first like reviews on social media. And she was like, oh my God, a review. And I was like, I don't know what's happening. Because it was super early in whenever it came out. Maybe it was still even in 2020. Because that's when I started my account. It was like September. Maybe it was early 2021 when I got the arc or whatever. But yeah. And look at us now.
Right, look where we've come. I do book reviews for this company called Cloud Lake Literary. They're based in Thunder Bay. So at the time, I was doing one review a month, and they would send us catalogs, like publisher catalogs, and they'd be like, "Okay, go through, see what you like. If you see anything interesting, we can try to request it for you." And this one, like, the cover caught my eye. Mm-hmm. This was for Wisteria Society, and I was kind of looking at it, and I was like, this sounds weird. Like, this sounds odd. I don't do I'd never done a historical romance before. And I was like, you know what though? If I'm going to get sent a free copy, like, it's not going to cost me anything. There's no real risk. Let's try it. It'll be like, probably like a solid, like 3-star, 3.5, a fun couple of days to read. And then I was on vacation. So I feel like, would it have been 2021? I was in Thunder Bay. Like, I happened to be visiting my family at the time. And I was loving it. Like, I just remember as soon as I started, and exact same situation, I was like, what the fuck is going on? I'm sorry, can we swear on this podcast?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I was like,
it's rated E, so
excellent.
We're good.
It came out in June of 2021.
Oh, wow.
That makes sense. Because I think I would have read it in either July or August.
Okay.
Like, I got sent a finished copy.
Well, that's exciting.
I need to I don't know. I need to host a giveaway for this series though, because I've received all of them through Cloud Lake. I have not given India a penny of my own money, and I need to, because I love these books so much. I need to support her financially. But yeah, I remember I was sitting in my grandma's living room and I was reading, and I don't remember if it was a spicy scene, and my family was nearby. Like, they were all sitting at the dinner table and I was in the living room reading, and I was like, this book is so good. But like the beginning, I remember being like, okay, I don't understand I'm like, is the house flying? Like, they're talking about being pirates, but then they're like, go get the house off the ground. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? But then, you know, within 20 to 30, like 20 pages, you kind of get the gist of it. And the entire time, I just remember grabbing whoever was walking past me and being like, this is insane. I'm loving it. And everybody was like, I don't care. I was like, but you should care. Like, it's so good. And then I read League of Gentlewomen Witches, and because Caroline had already read it, so I was able to scream to somebody, which was like so important, because I was like, oh my God, it's even better. Like, it's even better than the first one. I don't know if we're going to be getting into rankings and stuff, but I think League might be my favorite of the three.
It is.
But they all have something so different and so special about them. But anyway, that was my experience. Caroline, tell us about your experience with the first book and how you found the series.
I honestly don't remember a ton. I do remember it was like right after it came out. It was still up for request on NetGalley, and sometimes even after a book is out, I'll request it if I'm not sure I want to buy a physical copy. Because if I get approved, then I have the ebook copy, and if I like it, I can buy the physical copy, which is kind of cheating, but I still leave a review, so is it? So I got the NetGalley arc, I think, like right after it came out, and I remember pausing about halfway through the book to go order the physical copy of it, because I was like, well,
my new personality is just unlocked.
Yeah.
Oh, this is it. Here we are.
It was fairly early in my historical romance reading as well. I think I was still pretty solidly in the like illustrated cover
well
phase.
That's also fun because it was early in mine too, so I thought it was like the super spicy book. And like especially like the first one is not. But like I remember thinking, whoa, this is hot. I mean, it still was hot in the like India Holton hot. When I reread it, I was like, "What? Why did I think this was like the hottest thing I'd ever read?"
Because you're in it, and you're like, "Wow, Ned Lightborn."
Yeah, but then I mean, Alex. No, I mean, Captain O'Reilly can be the captain of my ship any day. Like, yeah. So that one, I
will say that one. Really for all three of the books, I think the other ones are easier to read because if you've read the first one,
you already know.
You know the world building. And like they do expand because obviously in the second one you get the witches and in the third you get Aunt. But like you already kind of know what's going on and you know what to expect. So the Wisteria Society I liked it even better on the reread because
now when you're not
which I love getting dropped into books. This is it's a like high fantasy, not at all romance, but the first Realmbreaker book by Victoria Aveyard was a fantasy book that I really enjoyed because it does kind of the same thing, only instead of being like fun and hilarious, it's dramatic and high fantasy. But it just like drops you into a story. And it doesn't really do exposition, it just is like go.
So like medias res or something like that. Yeah.
And medias res or whatever.
Yeah.
And medias, I don't know.
Something from my humanities days.
I was going to say, I have an English and film degree. I think it's something like that.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
It's just like,
it just means you're like right in the middle.
Yeah. Sure.
You're dropped right into the story. I think it's en medias res, but anyway.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Latin.
I sure did take Latin. I was a classics minor, so I sure should know. And I don't, not even a little bit. But it sounds correct, the words that you're saying.
I mean, if none of us know the difference, we can pretend that it's right and be really confident in that. Yeah. And if it's not right, it is now.
Yeah. It's like, I know the definition, but Caroline knows my pronunciations go off the rails sometimes.
They do sometimes leave a little to be desired, and that's okay. Sometimes you're just a person who reads a lot and doesn't know how to say words because when they are written down, they look different. Omnipotent, my enemy.
The word kernel. Silhouette is another weird one. I learned that one by reading, and then I said it out loud and was shamed by my dance teacher. But like, I'm a firm believer in, like, if you mispronounce a word because you learned it by reading, like, I'm just proud of you, and I would like to give very gentle coaching on pronunciation, but like that teacher was mean. But I'm always like, you mispronounced it because you learned it by reading. Good for you. Your pronunciation is right now. Well done.
There was one, I can't remember what it was, but it's one that like even now I struggle to pronounce. And it's not facade, but it's something that has like a similar set of you know how sometimes words in your brain go together even though they're not even a little bit related? It's a word that's related to facade in my brain. And I can't remember what it was, but I do remember I was in a class in college and I said it out loud in front of the class to the professor, and the professor was like, oh, do you mean such and such, and like corrected my pronunciation. And I don't think anybody really cared or was paying attention, but I was like, I want to die.
I would have passed away. I would have dropped
the worst
out.
thing that's ever. And he was like not like nasty. He was very kind. I adored that professor. Like, did not make a big deal of it. Just was like, oh, you mean such and such. And I was like, yeah.
No, but I honestly think that would have made it worse. I would have been like, oh God, you're so nice about it. I need to evaporate right now.
And I still think about it. And I'm just like, wow. We have talked for so long.
I was going to say, so I told my partner that we were doing this tonight, and he's like, oh, how long do you think it'll be? And I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, I was like, like over an hour, but I don't know. And he goes, Megan, listen to me. If you're done in under 2 hours, I would be blown away. And I was like, but I haven't done any prep. Like, I'm not prepped for that. And he goes, as soon as you start talking, you're going to be fine. Like, it will. It's like, if you're done in under 2 hours, I will be shocked.
That tracks.
Yeah, it does. It really does.
So accurate.
Right. That is correct. We have been read for filth. Without even
tagged
being
in this
known.
tweet. I don't want to be. There's a tag in this photo.
Yeah. I'm in this photo and I don't like it.
Exactly.
Speaking of, actually, I'm bringing it all the way back to our conversation about words that we read and then said out loud without knowing how to pronounce them. Big Alice energy. Honestly, big Charlotte energy too. But I think
but definitely Alice.
I think that's Alice reading the dictionary, which I respect so much. I think that's such a funny bit.
Although the dictionary does have a pronunciation guide.
That's true.
And you know Alice is thorough.
That's so
I feel like she would learn a new word and try to work it into conversation or coax somebody else into using it so she can hear how it's pronounced. Like, that seems like an Alice thing.
That's valid.
Right?
So maybe it's more of a Charlotte thing.
Maybe. That being said, the bit of her, and my grandma is not a fluent English speaker, but I started reading this book while I was at her house, and I read her the passage, and I was like, do you even understand? Like, do you, like, just from a translation perspective, like, do you understand what I just said? And she's like, yes, that's funny that she's reading a dictionary. And I was like, yes, exactly.
You got it.
Yes, nailed it.
Accomplished. That's so funny.
Yeah.
Oh, Alice.
Oh, Alice.
I would die for her. I'm like, where are my notes? What are the
I will say,
touch on?
I initially, because I started reading this book at my grandma's, so I was like, I'm not going to tab it. I'm not going to do it. I don't have access to tabs, whatever. But Caroline will know that when I read League of Gentlewomen Witches and then reread Wisteria Society, I was in a tab drought. I literally had 8 to 10 tabs, period, that I was able to use. So I had to, like, brutally ration my tabs. So,
that's
like,
cruel. I would have.
If I can show you, like, I don't know if you can see, but, like, it's sparse. Like, there's not a whole lot of tabs in there.
Sad.
And there's not a ton of tabs in there. I can't tell if you can see it at all. It looks very blurry on my screen. And then this one has like 3 times the amount of tabs of the other 2 books combined, because anything that made me giggle got a tab, which was basically 1 line per page.
That is the one benefit to me of reading on my phone or Kindle is being able to highlight. Because, like, the second book, I mean, I highlighted like half that book in my arc. And I bought tabs to tab it, and they are still in their container. So that's depressing for me. But I love going back and having like all of the like digital ones because I can search and all of that. So it's like I have to kind of read my notes as I'm listening to the audiobook and then like go in and mark things in my physical copy. I have so many different formats of books.
See, I don't annotate on the first go almost ever unless I'm reading an ebook. And even then when I annotate or when I highlight things, it's very sparse.
Interesting.
So like when I went back, I made a graphic for Tea and Treason, and I went back to try to find a quote, and I was like, why have I think I only had like 8 highlights, something like that, and I was like, that's bizarre. Like, why did I not highlight more? So I reread it. This time I just put on the audiobook because I was like, I can go really fast and like I already know what's happening. And then as I was listening, I was like, oh no, hang on. And I had to go find in the like ebook where that was so that I could highlight things. Because the second time I read through, suddenly there's a million things I want to note.
Yeah.
So there's all the, or I swear to God, towards the end, because in the beginning it's mostly just like kind of funny things. But in the last quarter of that book, I swear there's just like passages that I've highlighted because it's just the most romantic thing I've ever read in my life.
Right? Oh my God. Like, oh. I did not expect Bixby to be such a romantic lead. I was like, just because of how he is in Gentlemen and Witches, I was like, he's going to be really withdrawn. He's going to be really quiet. Alice is going to kind of learn to read him a little bit. And like, to a big extent, she does. But at the same time, you have him look at her and he's like, I'm obsessed with this woman. And I'm like, I'm obsessed with you. Like, that's wonderful. And I was blown away. Like, I just didn't expect to have as many of those, like, for him to be so openly emotional throughout the book. Yeah. And it was like such a lovely surprise, especially because Alice is like, I absolutely do not care about this man. That's a hard no. And then Bixby's there and he's like, this is my wife. Like, I love her. It was wonderful.
And especially towards the end when he starts just constantly being like, you deserve love.
Yes.
Like, you are wonderful. And just like all the verbal affirmations. I'm like, why am I weeping? Like,
and like
epilogue. Don't even. We can't talk about the epilogue yet.
No, we'll get there, but we can't because we'll talk about that for the next hour, and then we won't touch on the rest of the book.
That's another one that, like, I think I started highlighting like a couple of passages, and then I was like, I actually have to stop because if I start, I will highlight the whole epilogue. Yep, there is like a whole paragraph. You can't really see it. That's
I believe
just
it.
one highlight.
Yeah, no, we can't see anything, but I believe you.
It's a whole paragraph where I was like,
Yep.
The whole thing.
Yeah, no, I only tabbed one. And the rest of it, I was like, just imagine that the whole epilogue is one big tab. But like, we'll get to the epilogue. But holy shit, it was perfect. But I love Secret Service of Tea and Treason, and there were certain things that while I was reading, I was making notes because typically I don't annotate or tab on the first read. I did with League because we were going live and it was my first time ever going live and I needed to do my homework. And then for Wisteria Society, it was a reread. But for Secret Service, it was the same kind of thing where I was like, I need to do my homework. I need to be prepared. And at the same time, I went into this conversation like just vibes. But like, I kept noticing, and I think I'm matching the vibe of this podcast perfectly, which is fantastic.
You did it.
But I remember we had talked about how the previous 2 books in the series, the depiction of aunts as like a figure and what they represent. And so as soon as it was like the governing body of the spy organization is aunt, I was like, this is going to be important. And as soon as we get to that point, like, and typically I don't catch like little manipulative moments right at the beginning, but when she's like, oh, Alice, behind you, and Alice turns around and the lady like puts a bunch of sugar in her tea, and I literally tabbed it and I wrote just like evil. Like, evil.
That is wench behavior.
Yep. Wench. But just that whole progression of like the aunts getting kind of more and more menacing in like each book, and how then in comparison you see Darlington and she's like, sugar is terrible for you, and Alice is like, thank you, and I'm like, oh my god, you belong here, Alice. Like, stay here.
Yeah, but that's why the third act hit me so hard, just because it was like deconstructing like all of the aunts and stuff. It was a time.
I'm trying to find I definitely wrote a note about like the kind of slow reveal of the insidiousness.
Yes, because it is slow.
Yeah, and I mean, you can tell, like you said, the sugar, like you can tell something's off at the beginning.
The one that hit the most was when Alice talked about the beatings, and Bixby was like, you were beat? And she's like, oh, it's fine. And he's like, I wasn't. What are you talking about? That one.
There's one, deep. Let me find the quote, because I think it was shortly after that, because once you get to that point, there's a lot of moments like that, where he's like, Pardon?
Yeah.
What? But there's like, I've highlighted an entire chunk, and it's another one where Daniel is like, it matters, like, you matter.
Yes. When he says that out loud, I was like,
stop. Well, but so the part that I ended up highlighting was turning her head to the window, she squinted against the light, determined to see neither the mingled look of love and lethality in Daniel's eye, nor the wan, sad ghost of a girl who had been caned repeatedly over the years until she learned to mask her oddness behind 1,000 faces. It does matter, Daniel argued. You matter. But she knew that it did not. She knew that she did not. Not the woman she was deep within, nor the girl she had been. Neither did the love she shared with this beautiful, dangerous, gentle man matter. The mission might be finished, but Aunt owned her soul.
God. And then you've got that mirrored in like Daniel's tattoo and how she analyzes like it's like the fact that it's climbing up his spine and like how it's like choking and thorny and all that. And like I like that the book explored how they have different relationships with Aunt, and because they were male and female agents, they were raised completely differently. And even though they have almost the exact same like behaviors and they have the same sorts of like triggers and certain things that like will trigger overstimulation, and they're very similar on that front, but they were treated completely differently. And you have to assume it's because of their genders. He's going to be a male agent, she's going to be more of a fixer and a cleaner. And so the fact that it's like, look how similar they are and look how differently they were treated, but at the same time, like neither one's trauma is like undervalued to kind of elevate the other one's trauma, but like it just hit hard. And to a point that like it got darker than I was expecting in terms of how bad the treatment was for them as children, but I feel like it was handled really, really well. And like the book, it didn't like offset the tone of the book, but the humor, like we were in a quiet moment, like the really humorous, like loud hijinks parts had kind of eased back to give us a window to like sit with this. And I feel like that was handled really well, that like Holton can kind of really balance these crazy, funny, outrageous moments and then really ease back and have these really tender, like unpackings of trauma. And it's just like, it's hard to balance that well, but I feel like she does it really well in a story that is like insanely hilarious and over the top, but you can still sit there and like really sit with these characters.
You have it too in League. I think it's better in this one, but you do have like the moment in League of Gentlewomen, which is where they've ended up in the dungeon, and that's when really more so that's when you unpack Alex's trauma, because you've kind of been getting Charlotte's throughout. But that's the first time you really sit down and Alex like tells her what happened. But I think in this one it's done really well there also, but I think in this one she does even better of a job of like building up to it and like giving you a lot of moments where you kind of pause and have this like, here's a horrible thing that they experienced, and you're like, oh no, that's devastating to read. Although I will say I appreciate that like they had these horrible traumatic experiences and they were different because of like their gender and what they went through. But also there's a really lovely moment where Alice says like she always kind of felt like she was in love with him because
B
had gone before her, and so like they knew what to expect with her because someone had experienced it before her.
I'm looking at it right now. There's one in chapter 8 at the beginning. That's when they were made to kiss in front of everyone. And so then it goes to that like situation that's normally like very comical or like a very like rom-com-esque situation. And then it immediately goes into them holding the broom back at the academy and how she was like the like process of having to do it in front of everyone while they were watching. It's like a very simple just holding the broom, but because everyone was watching, it was super overwhelming. And then you learn that Agent B the year prior destroyed the entire room, the same as Alice the next year, and how they both experience that same thing. And so then when they have to kiss, and it's a very like small tender kiss, I mean it changed her entire like worldview at that moment, and everyone else is like, whoa, that was, you guys have been married for 3 years, that was odd. But just like the levels of that scene, I think I wrote OMG in my my notes because I was like, oh.
I think about that part, and then I think they're talking about the same incident or a similar incident later, and then Alice is talking about how she was like overstimulated and she broke something and she got hit, And he was like, no, they took me to like the shooting range.
Yeah.
And so it was done really well, where you get to see how they're so similar and how this whole time they've been supporting each other even though they didn't know it. Like, I love that chapter at the beginning, or that bit at the beginning where she's like, I would love to have a slumber party with B. And I'm like, you will, just wait.
That whole part was hilarious. Why did Agent B have a slumber party with this princess?
Yeah, Agent B must be a woman, because why else would she be having a slumber party with this princess?
And then, like, in the middle, I'm beginning to suspect that it wasn't...
they didn't do much sleeping or something. Yeah.
Slumber party.
Well, also when she mentions it to Daniel, and he's like, what? That was a rumor.
This isn't where I was originally going with this, but all of Alice's, like, accidental innuendos... and
the
how they just get ridiculously more and more explicit, and Daniel is just losing his shit next to her the entire time. But like, it never failed to make me, and I'm not huge, like, a lot of times I'll find like innuendos don't land because I'm like, that was kind of like low hanging. But every time she did it, because she's like so genuinely not aware of what she's saying and how it's coming across, or like all of the other women are like clearly having a conversation about sex and Alice is talking about something completely different. Like, it cracked me up every single time, especially when she was talking with Daniel. But I felt like those all landed really, really well.
Yeah, the walk the plank one was hilarious.
Yeah,
walk the plank was good. It reminded, there's a really similar conversation in League where Charlotte is making just innuendo after innuendo unintentionally, and Alex is suffering. I can't remember the exact context, but like I remember being like, this is the funniest thing I've ever read. But also all of the moments where the pirates all have known that they are spies.
Yes.
Literally the entire, and they keep making references to it and like little jokes, and Alice, because she's Alice, has not picked up on any of it the entire time. They're like, something's with private eyes. Like, they are so fully aware. The pirates are so funny.
Yes, that killed me.
Oh, the pirates. Well, and also I love, and India Holton has posted about like writing these two autistic characters as obviously an autistic person, and how like they're different, even though they're both autistic, but there are different ways that manifests. And I really enjoy, like, they do have a lot of similar triggers, and so they understand each other in many ways. But then also you have like Daniel, who's better at like the euphemisms and like what is the word I'm like wordplay.
Yeah, he's better Alice,
right? Like interpersonal, like,
subjective language. Yeah,
and so he can like. There's a really sweet. I think it's either right before or right after she saves Cecilia, and somebody uses like a turn of phrase, and he goes idiom, or like like just kind of quietly to her, is like saves her from the confusion.
Yeah, and I think it happens a couple of times where he's like just standing kind of near her, and she doesn't have to look to him or any, because at first like, but it's not even more than a line, but it's literally just idiom Daniel supplied, and it's like just that the fact that he noticed. But then at the same time, then she'll notice when he gets really, really calm, and she shoots people out of the room. Because like they can notice each other. Like, he can tell that she struggles with subjective language, and so he helps her with that, and she can tell when he's getting overstimulated and murderous because people are being stupid, and so she knows like how to save people from like his scary calm. And it's cool because like on a lot of fronts they do have similar triggers, but then at the same time it was really cool watching them learn each other's like different habits and different like sensitivities, and how they were able to kind of like support each other in those. I'm sorry, I kind of cut you off, but like I love that whole dynamic.
Well, and he does it during sex scenes too. Like there's a moment where she starts like tapping her fingers, and he knows the cue, and he immediately stops to like figure out how to make it better, or like switches to affirm or hold. Which also there's a line about like her whole life, instead of learning how to touch her, people pull away, and he doesn't. He leans in, and I'm like, well, it's time to cry now, I guess.
Right, and it's almost like that's part of why she doesn't like to be touched gently, because it's so easy to pull away from something that's a gentle touch. So when he notices that she's like nervously stimming, he'll like grip her harder. But it's cool that they show that like he learns to do that. He doesn't see her stimming and go, I'm going to hold on harder. He learns that that's what she wants. But the fact that he notices her getting overwhelmed and he's like, right, no gentle touches, and he crushes her against him, and I'm like, yes, like it's just,
when
oh my god, the scene where he
like
just
cracks him in the jaw or something.
Yes. And how she's like, you have to be careful, I'll try to kill you, and he's like, I won't let you, and he just holds her tighter, and she's like, perfect, I can finally let go around this person because I physically could not overpower him and murder him if I get overwhelmed. And I'm like, honestly, that's a vibe. Like I love it.
Time to cry.
But yes, the scene when he just hugs her and she's like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm just holding you. I want to hold you. And because I know I remember I learned about this in Grey's Anatomy, I think. But there was that heart doctor who was autistic and was prone to getting overstimulated in like really loud environments. And so she goes to Christina and she's like, I need you to hug me. Like I need an even, steady, hard pressure, and that'll force my body to calm down. And that's not totally why Daniel hugs her, but I just thought about like he gives her a really hard, firm hug and it helps her like settle back into herself. And I was like, hey, Grey's Anatomy reference.
I love that.
Yeah. Such a good book.
I also think it's so fun. The first two have been kind of opposites attract. And like obviously, as is the case with basically any good opposites attract, you like come to find that they are more similar than they appear on the surface, right? Like Alex and Lottie's traumas are very complementary, and etc. But really, both of those are very opposites attract. Even Ned and Cecilia. You have like outlandish Ned versus take no shit Cecilia. God, I love them. I think this is the first one where we really get like two similar people that like they're on the same page, like they're competing, they're like almost in the exact same position, like they're at the top of their organization. They have very similar skill sets. They're really, really aggressively good at cleaning and folding, but like they're
folding the sheet scene.
Yes, in the elevator.
Yeah.
Yes.
Everybody's like, all right, I'm gonna take the stairs.
Or when like both of them are, it's like before Daniel starts when they're sharing the bed, and she looks up at the ceiling and she's like, I need to come back with a broom later, and or like a mop and like mop this ceiling. And then at the end of the scene, Daniel's like, God, I need to come back and mop this ceiling. And I'm like, you're the same. But it's so good, and it is different, like especially because in the last two books we hadn't seen that, and I think that's part of why I was expecting. Like, I think that's part of why Daniel in particular took me so by surprise, because Alice is really reserved. Even, like, with us, we don't get a lot of her emotions. Like, we figure out what she's feeling because she tells us she's feeling the opposite way.
Yeah.
And then we get scenes that are more from Daniel's perspective, and he's a lot more upfront about his emotions. And because I thought they were going to be so similar, I thought he was going to be a lot more reserved, and we were going to get a lot more of, like, I couldn't possibly be having feelings. But pretty quickly, he was like, I'm finding this woman incredibly endearing. And that's a little bit of a problem, but it is how I feel. And I was like, I like that. Like, it was but it was still, like, at their core, they still felt like very similar people, but it was nice that even still, they felt really distinct from each other, like, while reading.
Yeah, that was even at the end when, Daniel got out, like, right away and went to Alex and stuff. And, I mean, that in itself was just seeing them hug.
Yeah.
Stop. The line where he says, I'm going home, and then immediately goes to Alex.
And then Alex right away knows that something's wrong.
Yeah. It was, I mean, that's like, part of the last, like, 25% that just absolutely guts you.
It's eviscerating. Like,
you just start crying and don't stop. That's where I know,
because it was so just the friendship and the love between them. And then how you see Alice, who, it was really sad to see her back in the, aunt role until she's like, nobody steals her books and her Mr. Bixby.
Yes, no one steals my Mr. Bixby. Oh my god,
that's my favorite line in the entire book. No one steals my Mr. Bixby. Like, took me out.
I think mine was like 2 pages later when he goes, I'm sorry I couldn't get to you sooner, and she, like, he's like, I'm sorry I didn't come for you sooner, and she's like, I'm sorry I didn't escape and make that unnecessary sooner. And I love those scenes where it's like, they're like, I just love that, where he's like, I wish I could have come for you faster, and she's like, I wish I could have come to you faster. Like, and the fact that they were both on the same page, like, that hits me. And I was like, I have to mention that at some point because I loved that line.
All right, hang on, wait. While we're talking favorite lines, I have to contribute. I have 2.
No one move on.
Hold on. It's important because it's related. Number 1 is related to the, like, because they have 2 very mirrored or like parallel lines with her. Nobody takes her books and nobody takes her Mr. Bixby. But he'd found that heart and they'd taken it from him. They'd taken Alice. Illegal. All right. And then 2 is home, Alice said dreamily, looking at Daniel again. Where is that? I don't know yet, he said. Shall we find out? Anyway, continue. That was all. I simply. Oh, wait, I had another point before we move on from this part of the discussion.
Yeah, I do too. I'll get in line, but like I do too.
Like, hold our hands up. Like in a Zoom room, you click the little raised hand. I think part of the reason, besides just the, like, their autism is slightly different in each of them, and so I think Daniel's already better with, like, interpersonal, just like he's better with language. But I think part of it is absolutely that he was undercover with Alex and was a pirate for so long. Because already you've seen what happens when you take somebody out from this very oppressive organization that's trying to force you into a certain role. And the answer is he starts to, like, develop feelings and, like, love other people and, like, discover that he can be something outside of that. Whereas Alice has literally never had that at all in any capacity because she was taken from an orphanage when she was 6 and was raised in this really insidious organization. And so I think that's part of why, like, Daniel has people that he can go to and be like, I am sad and I miss you and everything is wrong. And so he figures out sooner that he needs to get out of this. Whereas, I mean, Alice was planning on escaping, but her response wasn't, I'm going to leave right now, because she didn't have anybody to go to.
She had to have a plan to do it,
She was also put in a little bit more of a position where they were like, someone's going to escort you to your next assignment. Whereas Bixby, they were like, go home.
Yeah, we trust you. You're fine.
Yeah, go home, bud.
Well, I think also, like, they knew he would. I mean, he had just, like, fucked up those guys after drinking a ton of
him, and it didn't.
They gave him a tranquilizer, and he still, like, took those guys out. So I think at a certain point they know, like, Bixby's not somebody we can.
We can't physically detain him,
right? Whereas Alice, again, has not spent time with the pirates, is not gonna fight back, or so they think, because they've got their claws in her.
Isn't there actually a line where she says something about how hard the last weekend's been, and Daniel's like, I lived with a pirate for 2 years. Like, I can only imagine how overwhelmed you are, because I'm overwhelmed and I've been exposed to this before. So they're kind of like laying that groundwork already, that like Daniel's a little bit more primed to get out than Alice is, because he's had that extra exposure. And like, you see Alex and Charlotte also, like, all of the cameos every time Alex, Charlotte, Ned, and Cecilia showed up, I was like, like, every time.
So good. When also Daniel's friendship immediately, like, the first time you meet up with Alex and Charlotte, and he's like, oh, I love y'all and I miss you, but like, he like internalizes it all, and Charlotte is like, okay, now hug. You guys
tell
each
other you love each other,
right?
You know, this is the truth. Sorry, before we move on though, I have another favorite line, and it is in the epilogue, which I know we said we wouldn't talk about, but just when it
you mean the whole epilogue? Just
it's the one line I tabbed. Everyone sit still while I read you 6 pages of the book that I left. No, but it's the line. It was like,
I'm seated.
It was, they were honorary aunties and uncles to each other's children, which like stabbed me in the heart, because they've all had these unhealthy auntie relationships, and now they're not giving that to each other's kids. But then the other line was immediately after, but it's, Alice wished she could reach back to little Alice, hunched alone and hurting in a dormitory bed, and assure the girl that time would see her happy and loved just the way she was. And I'm like, oh my God. But the big thing is just that aunties and uncles, and that way that like they've all been able to like heal each other. And again, we'll go into more detail when we get to the epilogue, but I was like, we're talking favorite lines, and that part really gets
I also have some favorite lines out of that epilogue.
Yeah, we'll get there, but
I feel like I'm snorting emotion. Like, India Holton was like, what if I'm going to create an epilogue that is so emotionally damaging but also healing.
I'm making that meme as soon as we're done here. I have that meme pulled. I I think it's on Mimetic right now because I was making something else with that format. So I literally have it primed and ready to go.
It hurts my heart in like that, like if everything is right way, where you're like, this is so wholesome and it's everything that I want and love in life.
Well, I had a friend come up to me at work because we've got a bunch of Secret Service in right now, and we have 2 copies of League, and we don't have any Wisteria Society because I keep putting my staff pick sticker on it and putting it in the staff pick bay, and it sells really well. Like I think we've sold 10-ish copies. Like it's moving. So I'm like, you know what? That's how I'm paying India for these beautiful books that I never paid for. But she was like, hey, can I just start with Secret Service since that's the one we have? And I was like, absolutely not. And she's like, well, what do you mean? I was like, no, you have to read them in order. Well, don't they all follow different couples? Yes, but you have to read them in order. They build on each other. Wisteria Society sets up the world and it sets up the incantation, and then Witches builds on that and gives you a new society, but it doesn't go back and re-explain the incantation. It just shows you a different way that it's used. And then Secret Service kind of does that again. You've got the characters who were introduced in the previous book, and it wraps everything up I'm like, you absolutely cannot read that epilogue until you're at the end. Like, you can't do that book first. You just can't. No, absolutely not. I'm going to go hide all the copies of Secret Service until everybody's read book 1 and 2. But, like...
It would also just be so confusing.
It would.
As confusing as book 1 may have been to start, I couldn't imagine dropping into this. Book 3 first.
Because you've got pirates and witches, and a secret society, words. You know what I'm saying? The Secret Service, and she doesn't explain pirates or witches.
No,
it's expected that you know.
No, it's a series. It really does have to be read chronologically, and I love a good romance series where you really can dive in anywhere, and I feel like historicals are a really good place for that. And I know. A lot of times it benefits you to read the series in order, but you don't have to. But this one, you absolutely do. And so I've always struggled with, because League is my favorite of the 3. So I want to put my staff pick sticker on that and make sure we order copies of it. But you can't, like, I can't put that in the bay because you're going to pick that up and you're not going to have any idea what's going on. And it is just like, and then, you read Secret Service of Tea and Treason and you get to that epilogue and it's the end of everybody's story. Like, you just can't. You can't read it until you've read all 3 of them and you're at the end because it wraps everything up so perfectly. God, they're good books.
Yeah. That epilogue is, I know Caroline won't support this, but at the end of the Twilight movies with 1,000 years playing, and there's like a whole dramatic 1,000 years and all the different characters throughout the movie at the end of like the 5th one or whatever. I guess. Yeah, 5th one because there are 4. Okay. And that's just how this rolls in my mind because it perfectly encapsulates like every character and it's just so emotional. So I'll gladly put my $1 in the Twilight tax jar. Because 1,000 years forever.
Do we have to pay a fine if we mention that book?
No.
Twilight and Shrek.
It's just that Hannah mentions Twilight like every episode.
It's hard.
Oh.
And I've never read or seen Twilight, so everything I've ever learned about Twilight has been against my will.
Okay, so you and I will have some separate conversations because I know a lot about, not that it's like, I had my Twilight era.
Yeah.
And then I had my Twilight Renaissance era where I just really liked looking at Tumblr posts from the Twilight Renaissance because I find them fucking hilarious. But I'm bad with like, I'll sit and I'll watch the movies and I'll be that person who leans over and it's like, so blah, 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 blah. And I'm like whispering little secrets and whatever. And then the baseball scene will be coming up and I'm like, this is literally one of the best scenes in cinema. Like, it's so good. And I'm a film student, like I'm a film major. I have a degree in movies and I lean over and tell people that's one of the best scenes ever put to film. And I stand by that. But actually, sorry, this is only tangentially related. But while we've been talking, I got a text from my aunt asking how much the box set of Twilight would cost.
Amazing.
I'm like, I could loan you my copies, except all of the covers are coming off. Like, they're a bit of a mess. But
I never
thrift them. But.
I never. Oh, there are so many at thrift stores.
Oh, you go to Value Village and you can get the entire series. Like, it'll be fine.
Every thrift store has Twilight. I never read the books. I've just watched the movies.
What?
I was like, I've always been an audiobook person and I despise the narrator of the audiobooks. My parents listen to them, like both of them. Everyone here is a Twilight fan in my family. But I've only seen the movies. And so like, I don't know everything, but I think I know like a good amount, especially from what they've told me that I've missed and stuff.
Well, so another day we'll come on again after both of you have read the books. I'm inviting myself back, and
it'll be an after hours episode.
Yeah, and we can discuss the Twilight series.
I actually
the difference between the books and the movies and all that. But okay, the other option is you can say, and I'll read them to you. That can happen too, but that's going to be a much longer episode, and then we're going to have all this copyright shit that we have to deal with.
I think actually that it would be funnier if the episode is you all explaining Twilight to me.
Can we do that?
we have a newsletter exclusive podcast where we have posted 0 like full length episodes. But that's where we can just get truly off the rails.
It's going to involve alcohol, and I think it would be
amazing,
really funny. So
it would be really funny.
We'll put a pin in that and come
Let's
back for an after hours episode when we all get drunk and you explain the plot of Twilight to me.
I'm genuinely
I know a fair amount of references. I couldn't tell you the plot, but I know a lot. I know the spider monkey quote. I know what the hell how the hell have you been,
where the
Loca?
hell have you been?
Whatever that one is, the Loca quote. I know you nicknamed my daughter after the Loch Ness monster.
So all 3 of those I have said in this podcast.
I knew them before you
various
said them,
episodes.
Though.
Yeah,
but those
are the main ones. Yeah, because they are the best. You named my daughter after the Loch Ness
monster.
So I know the important things.
You do. Those are the 3 most important bits. Although we will be covering the baseball scene in extreme
I've
detail.
seen the baseball scene.
Amazing. That's all you need then, honestly.
There's
those 3 quotes and the baseball scene.
To add another pop culture thing that we always reference, Taylor Swift, when she was on SNL, they did a parody of Twilight. Bill Hader was Edward and Taylor was Bella, and it's the best 5 minutes of an SNL skit that I've ever seen.
I have to watch that.
I'll link it in the show notes. It is so funny. They're Frankenstein. They're not vampires, and it's the most hilarious thing ever. And that whole SNL episode, like I had it on my iPod Nano. Like the one small episode was just on that little iPod, and it got its usage because it's such a good SNL episode anyway. But that Twilight one lives forever in my mind, rent free. I pay it rent, actually.
Ooh, sorry. Last thing. I pay it rent. Sorry. Last thing, and then we can move on from the Twilight thing. But we will in our recap, we will also be discussing The Short Second Life of Bree Tanner, which I would argue is the best of the Twilight books. We'll discuss. You look confused. I'll explain later.
I have no clue what this is.
It's a spinoff. So you know how in Eclipse, there's like the newborn army that's coming in, and then you know how there's that one random scene where there's that girl. And Esme's like, we're going to keep her. She's innocent.
And then she just gets freaking...
Yeah, so that's Bree. Oh. And so Stephanie Meyer wrote a really short little book about Bree. And as she was writing, she was like, I got to be honest with you, my biggest regret in this series was killing off Bree.
Because I was going to say, she writing her beheaded her right there.
Right, and she's like, as I was writing her book, I realized, like, I love her. And she kind of, like, retcons a bunch of her lore. So, like, the whole vampire sparkle thing, she actually makes that make sense in Bree's book.
How fascinating!
It's fascinating. We'll discuss that later. But this is how I'm convincing you guys to invite me back. I'm going to drop these little tidbits, but not actually give you the answers until next time.
We'll never know why vampires sparkle.
No, you got to invite me back.
Mm-hmm. I respect that.
Yeah.
Is this how it feels? Just reading one of the later 2 books, completely skipping Mysterious. Is that you're like, what? Flying houses. Witches.
Like I just wrapped my head around the alleged witches, and now you're telling me that houses fly? It's such a difficult series to summarize too, like to try to sell it when I describe it to people, because I'm like, okay, there's one fantastical element, and that's that houses fly. I just need to get that off the bat. And they go, what? And I'm like, Lady Pirates, Captain Flying Houses. And they're like, okay. And I'm like, just trust me on this one. Because I'm like, it's better if you go in knowing that. If you figure it out on your own, that's fine. But it's really hard to sell the series without explaining that that's what's going on.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's like, and then this assassin shows up to try to kill Cecilia, which of course is fantastic because that means she made it. And then, cue laughter. And then She has to pair up with her assassin who's already a little bit in love with her, and then they laugh again, and it's like, yes, I'm going to sell this book today. But you always have to start with flying houses and the moment of like, what the hell is this woman trying to sell me? And you're like, just trust me. It's going to be great. We're not even going to get into the alleged witches. Like, we'll deal with that later.
That's a whole book later. You
That's
gotta
a whole
get
other
into
issue.
pirates first.
Yeah.
Understand pirate logic, which
wrap your brain around that.
Because then witch logic is the opposite. So you gotta get the one established. This series is the epitome of just stay with me.
Yeah, it really just humor me on this.
You start this book and it's literally like, just stay with me. Just it'll make sense. Just keep reading.
Yeah,
you'll get there.
Yeah, and there's no moment to stop and be like, how are you doing? It's literally like, just trust me. We're just going to keep going. You can't stop. You got to just move with it.
Or it's like, now take my hand and we wait and go. We're going. And we're running. We're going. That's this series.
Yes. But there is no moment of like, we wait. It's literally just take my hand and then you're running.
Yeah, the more that I think about it, book 1 is so wild with the Bronte guy.
Unhinged.
Like, because that's the one I've read the least, just because book 2 is my favorite. Well, I suppose book 3 is technically the one I've read the least, but like book 2 is just more of a romance novel to me than book 1. So it's a little bit more my style. But just thinking about everything that happens in book 1, like, I'm impressed that I was able to stay along.
And like the fact
Yeah.
that you jump into it with with League and Secret Service, you know what you're getting. Like you sit down and you know what you're jumping into. But with Mysterious Society, the fact that like that we were able to sit down and just be in this and be like, cool, this is what's happened, and like to try to tell people you have a villain who is super inspired by the Brontes. Like, it's so weird. It's such a weird, and she's got a maid who can see ghosts but not really. Like, it's just,
but it all makes sense when
it does. When you're in it.
Yeah, I got my friend to read the first one. I don't know if she ever read the second one, because she definitely was not a fan of it. She actually listens to the podcast, so hello, Maddie.
Hi, Maddie.
But she wasn't a fan of book 1, but I'm like, you should stick around for book 2, because that is a little bit more like, you already know what's happening, and it's a little bit more like romance novel-esque. I'm like, you got the hard work out of the way with book 1. And I don't know if she ever did book 2, but yeah, it's a tough sell, but I think once you get over that hump of just like flying houses.
Yeah. So I start with that. I get that out of the way.
Yeah.
And then I like to tell people too, it's like, it is like, it's a historical romance and it's making fun of, like, it's satirizing the Brontes and Jane Austen and those sorts of tropes. So like, it's slower to start. The writing style isn't easy. Like, it's not modern, simple writing. There's a lot of like wordplay and like clever word choices, but once you're in it, like, it is going to move quickly. Like, you're going to be in it. It's just going to take you a minute. And a coworker of mine, she's tried twice and she's made it to about 50 pages. And then we've spoken and they were like, hey, should I try it again? And I'm like, well, it is like, book 1 was my favorite book of 2021. Book 2 was my favorite book of 2022. Book 3 is up there for 2023. So like, no, I don't think you should try it again. Like, yes, definitely give it another shot now that you kind of know what it's about, because I really do think that it's worth it. But it is, I know a lot of people who are like, I tried it, I couldn't get past 20 pages. And I'm like, now that you know, I think you should try it again.
I will say, I think this is the one series that, like, I adore it. I would die for it. I push it on people all the time. But if, like, I have friends who read it and are like, I didn't really like it, I understand.
Yes.
Like, they say that, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think it's for everybody.
No, I fully agree with that.
It's for a really specific niche group of people that like that style of humor and that like get all the, because there were, even in the third one, there were references I didn't get. Like, I knew they were a reference, but I just didn't. It was like a literary reference that I don't have that touch point. So like,
yeah, I think because it's more of like a spy movie and spy literature homage, a lot of the references went over my head this time. Like, I caught a lot of Austen, a lot of Bronte. You pointed out some Star Wars ones in the second one, but like, in this one, I don't know that I caught, like, I don't know that I saw any references and I was like, ooh, reference. Like, I think a lot of them snuck past me.
I got a lot of, there were like Dickens and other, like.
Yeah, actually, the Dickens ones I got. Those actually, I think I tabbed one of those. They made me laugh. But
like, they do,
I agree.
She does that thing where she like reworks quotes.
Yes. And I did like where Yeah, and they like quote things to each other. But
like it starts with, it was the best of dress shops, it was the worst of dress shops.
Yes.
Like that kind of thing. Like I can
Yeah.
catch those, but a lot of times they'll be like, oh, have you read such and such? And I'm like, I don't know what we're talking about. And that's fine. But I will say, like, if you're not big into, like, the Brontes or Austen or, like, Victorian, or even, like, I was kind of surprised that this was, like, the first real historical romance that you enjoyed, because I wouldn't recommend it to somebody who doesn't already read at least a little bit of historical romance, because I think a lot of it is playing with, well, actually, it really is more playing with Victorian literature than it is with historical romance itself.
And I think because I'd read like, I'd had to read, like Austen and Bronte and stuff like that for school. So I had just read that or been actively reading it in university. So it worked for me because I had just been consuming and analyzing those. And I remember actually I had just graduated and I emailed my prof, who was like retiring, but I emailed her and I was like, okay, so we've talked about, because we've done like, she does classes on like, she teaches you like how to duel, and then she has us like, you duel each other, like she makes you like there, and it's like, it was awesome, but you have to follow all the rules and whatever. And so I because I was her TA, so I sent her, I was like, you should do that Hamilton song because it actually breaks down the rules of dueling really, really well, like you play it in class. But then I emailed her and I was like, I'm not saying you have to teach it, but I genuinely think you would love this book.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I just think like it's that perfect blend of all of those things. But yeah, no, it was my first historical. And I do think like, I don't think I've read any other historical that's been like this.
It'd be hard to follow up.
But
like, what would you do to read something similar?
I mean, you would have to look in. There are other historical paranormals, but they're not the same brand of humor.
No, I think really what I did was this just kind of opened my mind to historical romance, and it also opened my mind to anything that's kind of like genre bending. So I started like, even I always talk about like A Natural History of Dragons is a book that I never would have read if I hadn't read this, even though they're completely different. But it just sort of opened my eyes to like something that's not fully like in the mainstream, or something that's written a little bit more niche. And so now I love that tiny genre of like lady scientist studies magical thing. And I'm obsessed with that genre. And I never would have read that. Like, I never would have dabbled in that if not for The Dangerous Damsels. And with historical romance, I think really I started going based off of Caroline's recommendations. Like, I saw you posting other things and you were talking about relationship dynamics. And I was like, okay, I think that would work for me. So I did like Portrait of a Scotsman was probably my first like official historical romance. And I loved it. And then so I have the other two in the series. I've read the Bringing Down the Duke, but I haven't read the second one. I have like the Kit Webb books, but I haven't read them yet. The Duke Undone I absolutely loved, but it was a little bit more like, it's a historical romance and not so much like a rom-com. Like, it's a little bit heavier.
That one's heavy.
That's a heavy book. Book 2 though, Caroline just read book 3.
Yeah,
I love that one. Book 2 is my favorite in the series.
The green one. The
green one is
Runaway Duchess. Yeah.
Okay, I think the Duke Undone was my favorite because I've done the Runaway Duchess and I liked it, but it didn't. And I really liked how, because I was worried that she wasn't going to be a likable character, but I really liked her and the romance. But something about the Duke Undone, I can't even remember a lot of the details, but something about the romance really stuck with me. Like, I still think about it really fondly, even though the details haven't fully stuck. I'm obsessed with the Wild Winchesters because I watched Bridgerton, because I was like, it's the vibe. So there are a lot of things, and I've been very open about this. I don't know what, like, I know a Duke is better than a Viscount, but I don't know how any of it stacks up. None of it. And Caroline was like, I'm going to make a video. And I was like, I will try to watch it, but I can't guarantee I'll learn anything. Like, it's,
I have been planning a historical romance 101 series for a very long time. And now I'm like kind of not on TikTok nearly as much, but
I would be literally the first one to watch those videos because I don't know. I don't understand the hierarchies at all. But I'm in it for the vibes. And I have like A Lady's Formula for Love.
That's a great series. Knocking all of your books on the bookshelf just falls.
But that's the one that I want to do next. I don't know that I've actually like sat and read a historical romance in a couple of months. I think
you would really like that.
That would be a great one.
I think you would really like it, especially if you like lady scientists, that kind of vibe.
I think that's what drew me to it.
We did an episode with Elizabeth Everett last season.
She's one of my favorite people.
She is very funny.
Hilarious.
She's really lovely. I actually got the third book in her series. I won a random Instagram giveaway, which like I never win. So I got sent book 3, and then book 1 had like the bodyguard trope. So I was like, ooh, I love that. So I picked it up. And then if I like it, I'll pick up book 2. And she was really sweet. She's messaged me a couple times and just was kind of like, congrats on the win. I really hope you like it. Every time I post about the book, she's like really sweet and talks about it. And I always just love that. But I'm definitely still in my like cartoon cover era. Like I've been doing. I was
gonna say.
I love the Wild Winchesters. I just picked up. I'm gonna try to do this without knocking everything over again. But I just picked up my first Lisa Kleypas. Which none of the other ones that we have at work have step backs, and I'm genuinely pissed about it because I'm obsessed with this. It's like not as cool as the ones you guys find, but I'm obsessed with this.
They're still good. I love any step back.
Right?
I like the Ravenel's step backs. I think they're great.
I think some of them are very edited, like the Devil in Spring. I think maybe her dress looks very prom. But
I mean, such is life sometimes with modern historical romance. But I mean, to be fair, old historicals with the like 80s makeup on the heroines with
or the crop tops. There are some historical with like crop tops and like 2 pieces.
Who knows what was going on?
Yeah, I'm definitely much more picking up cartoon covers. I've just found that, and I don't want to be. I'm working on especially because I've read the Wild Winchesters and love them, and I'm really excited for Lisa Kleypas. So I'm trying not to see an old school cover and be like, oh, old school romance, and like rule it out, because these have been really awesome. Like all the ones I've read, I've really, really loved. So I want to do like Lisa Kleypas because I've heard you talk about her a lot. So I want to do a couple that are like really tried and true that I've heard really, really good things about, just to introduce myself to the genre, and then I can start kind of like exploring a little bit more.
Tessa Dare would be a great start too.
Yeah, because I've heard really good things about Tessa Dare as well.
She would be one I would recommend to people like entering the genre. Any of her series, Spindle Cove, Castles Ever After. I think her most recent one is one a lot of people talk about recently because it's like the newest one. But Spindle Cove is great.
Yeah,
but she has a very approachable writing style too.
Oh, okay, I like that because I want to start getting into more like either just like staple authors or staple books of the genre, and I know that like sometimes you get the ones with the cartoon covers and they're either like not like a different genre, but they do the tropes a little bit differently, and they kind of dial things back, and they're more kind of not modern, but
they can be more modern feeling though.
Or like like not sterilized, but like they ease back on some of the like outrageousness of the genre, but at the same time I want the really insane, like somebody gets like whenever you guys joke about like
somebody gets kidnapped in the third act, or
I want the third act kidnaps, and I want the heroine shoots the hero in the arm. Like that's the shit that I want, and you don't see it as much in the cartoon covers.
Number one, this is true. It really, the cartoon covers are interesting to me because some of them are like some of my favorite books, like really good intro historical romances, and then some of them you're like, this feels very like a traditional publisher is trying to like really push it to non-historical romance readers, and that's why it has the illustrated cover. And like so it's hard to tell, like, is this gonna be like the League of Extraordinary Women or the Elizabeth Everett books, or like these where they're really fun, or it's gonna be something that you're like, oh, that wasn't great, I didn't love that.
Even like, and again, this is like, I haven't read a lot of ones like the old school with the
like clinch covers.
Thank you. But even like the League of Extraordinary Women, like even those, I love those books. I have a ton of fun with them, but they still feel a little bit more like palatable almost, and like commercial.
They're
like they're easier to sell. And that's like, it almost feels like the cartoon covers are like their own subgenre of historical romance, and then clinch covers, like it's not just a stylistic thing. There's kind of more at play in terms of like the actual writing. And again, I can maybe speak to that more once I've read more like clinch cover mass market. But yeah, no, I've been loving the Wild Winchesters. I have what is it? How to Be a Wallflower, which I've had for a little while. That's just kind of tucked away that I've been wanting to read. I haven't done it yet, but I want to. My hope is if I can do one historical romance a month, like I think I tend to crave about one. Like I typically want to do like one YA fantasy, one historical romance, one middle grade. Like that way I kind of get a little bit of everything. But lately I've just been committed to reviewing a bunch of other stuff. But I like historicals. Like I've enjoyed every single one that I've read. I've been wanting to do more of them.
There's a difference in the writing. I think because just like from the publishing end, if you see something getting an illustrator or like a trade paper size rather than mass market, it's probably because they're thinking like that's more expensive to produce. So it's more expensive to buy. And so that's a like bigger audience. They're going to try to push it to more people, which is why like I think, and I can't say this like even having worked in publishing, all I can say from that experience is like if it's trade paper sized, it's because they think it's going to sell more widely. Whether that changes in the right, so I do think it's fair to say like you look at the illustrated cover trade paper and they're less bonkers usually, unless of course it's like the India Holton where you're going full blown like absolutely like fantasy historical romance. But I think it makes sense that like they're gonna want to push the more like historical fiction, maybe slightly less steamy feeling like the League of Extraordinary Women.
The Winchesters too would make sense because I know the next one is getting the pink cover,
right? It's switching the trade paper, but that one also feels like very India Holton. Like it's not magical, but it's
and it has fantastic Bridgerton vibes. Like it's wacky, but it's not wacky in terms of like sex, and it's not wacky in terms of like outrageous relationships.
The characters,
like the characters are just fun, wacky, and like the sex scenes are great, but like it's not. It doesn't have like really bonkers steamy tropes. It just has those kinds of bonkers, lovable characters. And it has that Bridgerton vibe. So it's like they will sell well because Bridgerton is selling well. And so they're kind of a good, like if people don't read historical romance, but they've read Bridgerton, I like to recommend The Wild Winchesters because they have that same sort of vibe. And so it makes sense that they're making the switch. I don't like that my books won't match, but like that's fine.
Well, there's always, the way that I have been consoling myself is that trade paper gets reissued in mass market.
Yeah, so like it'll be like a year or 6 months or whatever, and it'll get a mass market release.
There's also the potential, which like this is not a thing that has been talked about to my knowledge, but there's always the potential for mass markets to get reissued in trade paper if they're like doing really well.
That's true.
Yeah, like the Sarah McLean.
We don't need to talk about that cover.
The prom one?
9 Rules. That pissed me off so much.
Yeah, but it looks
Megan,
like a YA
if you look
book.
at the original 9 Rules to Break When Romancing a Rake, which is also, I think, you can start with Sarah McLean there. And I think, like, her early books are not some of my favorites, but Sarah McLean is one that I recommend reading in order. But 9 Rules is a great book. But the first one's like a step back. It's like a woman in a dress, and then the step back is
she in like a white she's in like a white dress.
When they reissued it, it is like a strapless it's a prom dress.
It is a prom dress.
That does not say historical romance to me.
I don't know who their target audience besides YA people they were trying to get with that.
They have it in the Bridgerton font. Like the actual title.
The sans serif is a flag upon.
Yeah, it's not just Bridgerton, but it's one of those things where it's like it doesn't look like a Bridgerton cover in terms of what she's wearing, but the font is the same, so people are going to see it and think Bridgerton.
Which pisses me off on multiple levels. Like Megan Frampton, they've like changed her, and like Lorraine Heath, they've changed their signature like author fonts. So like Lorraine Heath has had the same author font, same thing as Megan Frampton for years, and it's iconic. And then now it's a sans serif. And then they mix fonts. Like I can speak on fonts and covers.
Hannah has a lot of feelings about fonts.
Yeah. Because some of the choices they're making recently just
honestly, I love
from
that.
An artistic level, not even like a genre level, but just a does this look good level. And spoiler, no, they don't.
Well, I've been it's been kind of because I've been my creative well hasn't been as full as it used to be. So I do a lot of like I analyze like OG versus redesigned book covers and which one I like better, or US versus UK covers and which one I like better. Because typically I can rant about a cover for a couple of minutes. Like I can make that content pretty consistently, and it's fun and it's interesting to analyze, and it's very subjective. But I too have a lot of feelings about covers and cover designs. And
well, even the UK versions of Bringing Down the Duke, I hate that font so much. It's just not readable. It's like spindly.
I don't have the same
strikes. It strikes such an anger in me, and I can't explain it.
It's just a slightly curlier font.
But it's just not readable. Like, it's ugly. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, God, that is ugly.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm seeing several different covers of this book, and they're all not good.
No.
But the swirly one, you're right, it's not readable.
And I took, like, in grad school, we had, like, a whole cover design and, like, how, like, the cover should be visible in, like, a very tiny space, because a lot of, like, trade, like, catalogs and stuff, like, have just very, like, thumbnail versions.
Yep.
And so even just that in itself, I'm just like, why would you choose that font?
Well, and I always find that kind of stuff fascinating, where, like, the cover itself is almost exactly the same. So what market statistics or market feedback made you think that changing just the font in this way would be beneficial? Like, I always find that interesting, and I don't know how to get that information, but, like, I'm always intrigued by stuff like that. Like, what factor made you think that small change was going to make it sell better in your region?
I don't know the answer with the fonts. I do always like looking at British or UK versions of romance novels specifically, though, mainly because the UK doesn't really, well, the romance market isn't huge over there anyway, but particularly historical romance, they don't read it almost at all. I think because it's mostly Americans that are writing historical romance. So, like, it's this, like, Georgette Heyer pseudo fantasy England.
Kate Bateman, I think she's British, so that is an interesting. She lives
in
America.
All American women,
but she's one of the only ones that I like.
It's really rare for a Australian.
British. Well, it feels like it's like like North Americans, like, romanticizing England and, like, Britain, whereas people who live in Britain are like, no, why?
Yeah.
So, you know, it's always a good time. I was just going to bring it back to say that this is an interesting discussion for me, just because there's a lot of the illustrated cover versus clinched cover debate, and I think it's just their gateway.
Exactly.
I think an illustrated cover book is a gateway historical romance.
Because both Carolyn and I got in with Bringing Down the Duke, and I can't say, like, I mean, now I've grown to love the clinch and the step backs and all of that, but I can't say that I hate the illustrated, because they got me in, and they're very easy, like you said, to kind of jump around in. Like, I went from Bringing Down the Duke to the Mr. Malcolm's List, which that one doesn't have any sex in it, and I thought that if it had illustrated cover, it had sex, so I was very confused when I read that. But then I went to Elizabeth Everett. She released in 2021 with a debut, and that was, like, around when I was discovering, like, the genre, really, because I did my bookstagram in 2020 at the end of it. And then, you know, went to Joanna Lowell with the Duke Undone. Minerva Spencer has illustrated series. It's like Outrageous is the one that I really like. That's book 2. Book 1 is like Notorious or something.
Yeah, I think and then 3
something like that. And I mean, those covers are ugly as I don't know what Kensington was doing. Like, a stock photo, like, do not like, but I was able to signal in my brain, illustrated historical, I know what you are. And so I do think, and again, the Amanda Collins from Forever, those, like,
the Ladies'
mystery
Guide.
Yeah, Ladies' Guide to Mischief and Mayhem, Murder and whatever.
Mischief and Mayhem.
My mom bought me Bringing Down the Duke, and then she also bought me the first Amanda Collins in that series, so she was also able to signify, like, what that meant. And so while I don't agree with, like, the Bridgerton style of, like, chopping off heads and stuff, and I just don't think that was the move, but I do think the illustrated covers were a very smart choice. And I'm not angry.
Back to, like, Megan's point about, like, it almost feels like a different genre. I don't know. Yeah. I love a bonkers historical, as we know. It was the genesis of this podcast, was us being like, let's talk about the most absurd historical romances we've read. I love it. The more bonkers, the better. Yeah. I don't know that I would have if it was like
first thing you ever read.
I'm trying to think of, like, something absolutely wild. The Windflower, for
Windflower,
example, like the 500.
Which I tried to buy, by the way, because you were ranting about it. I purchased a copy, and it got delivered to the front unit.
Horrible luck.
I know. This is literally the only times ever that I've lost book mail, but they all tend to be. They've all been brought up today. But
that is
my package was stolen, and then I tried to get a replacement, and they're like, "No, it's, like, out of stock now."
That is unfortunate. It's a weird book. I don't think if that had been my first historical romance, I would have been like, wow, this is great.
The genre for me.
Let's read more. I think I would have been very confused, in the same way that if I had started with, like, Prisoner of My Desire by Joanna Lindsay.
Oh my God.
I don't think I would have read more. But, like, you start with, like, E.B. Dunmore, or even India Holton if you're into fantasy, or Elizabeth Everett, or, like, one of those. And those are, like, they're still historical romances. They're still really good. They just fall more on the, like, closer to reality side of the spectrum. Which I think is more palatable for a contemporary romance or other kind of reader.
It would be really hard to really discover the genre on your own because, like, before I was online, like, I read Bringing Down the Duke, but it was really when I had a Bookstagram and was seeing stepbacks and was seeing, like, authors and interacting with them and interacting with everyone else's posts that I really understood the genre and, like, what I should be reading and checking out. Because I think if you're just, like, alone in it, it would be a very hard thing because you couldn't discuss it with anyone. I mean, that's another part why I created my account. I wanted to just talk about the books because my Goodreads had like 30 friends and no one was talking about those ones. And I thought I was like the only one reading Evie Dunmore. And so I think like if I didn't have it, like I just don't know how I would have discovered even Lisa Kleypas, because I don't know how. I mean, you go to Barnes & Noble and there are so many and they all look the same and you're like, how would you know? I think one of the first ones I just went to the thrift store and bought like 10 for 50 cents, and one of them was When He Was Wicked by Julia Quinn. It's one of the Bridgerton. And I mean, that one was one of my first introductions to the genre, and he comes back with malaria and his cousin married the heroine and then the cousin dies and Michael was always in love with her. So then he goes off, gets malaria, comes back. And then like, he's obviously sexually gifted and she hasn't like had the best sex of her life yet.
Classic.
And then he teaches her how to like go for a ride, and it's a whole thing. And it was a very good intro for me. I didn't realize it was in like a series because I didn't know how that worked yet. But I think maybe even without Bringing Down the Duke, I would have been like, what in the world am I reading? Because that was a great intro.
I think that's kind of where I'm at, because I think as much as it's getting better and being part of Bookstagram in particular, Book Talk a little bit, but Bookstagram, I'm starting to see more people who are like loving and appreciating clinch covers and classic historical romances, because before that, I don't think I'm alone in kind of having that assumption or being raised on that assumption that like historical romance are like
trashy, like trashy romance.
Yeah, like just kind of like pulpy, mindless romances, whatever. So you read like a cartoon cover and you're like, ooh, I like this. I'm of the opinion, I think part of the reason I get intimidated by clinch covers is because I'm like, they're going to be so smutty. And like, I don't think they're any like way more smutty than a cartoon cover, but I see a cartoon cover. Because I see a cartoon cover and I'm like, ooh, it'll probably have about two sex scenes, maybe 3, and they won't be outrageous. And that's like right in my sweet spot. And I see a clinch cover and I'm like, oh my God, it's going to be all sex. And that's not true, but like, you know, like the cartoon covers kind of ease you into that.
No, I did the same thing. It took reading Tessa Dare. I mean, I haven't read a ton of Tessa Dare, but I read one and I was like, oh, it's just a historical rom-com.
Yeah, it's just got a different style cover, but like doing like, especially the Wild Winchesters kind of showed me, I was like, okay, no, this is like exactly the same vibe, just a little bit wackier. And that was kind of what prompted me to be like, okay, you know what? I'm going to get off my ass. I'm going to buy a Lisa Kleypas book. I also just like reading mass markets. There's something really fun about holding it and then being like, I am going to crack the spine. I am going to like, this book is going to look so shitty by the time I'm done with it, because I'm going to get so into it. And I can't, like, I feel like I can't do that with my other books. And so like, that's such a treat. But yeah, I just feel like the cartoon covers ease you into it to some extent. And then you start being like, oh, this clinch cover has a premise that sounds really interesting and has all these tropes that I like that I've read in these other historicals. And then you can kind of dive in. But I still love, 90% of the historical romances I own are cartoon covers, because you just hear about them more. And so when you walk into a bookstore and you see all of these mass market clinch covers, it's hard to sift through and figure out which one might be the best place to start. Whereas a lot of the cartoon covers, they've only published 2, like the authors only published 2 or 3. So it's kind of easier because you have less choice. But yeah, I've found, actually, I'm sure I have screenshots from both of your guys' pages of like just a premise of something, or like a weird, like, or something really wacky about one of the books, and I screenshot it and I'm like, I'm going to circle back to that because that sounds wild and really, really fun. And then they're cheaper. So it's like, it's not as stressful of an investment, because you're like, this cost me $12. If I don't love it, it's not like it was a $23 paperback.
Or if you go to like Half Price Books or something, like it can be even cheaper, and you're way more likely to find like mass market romance sections in thrift stores.
Massive.
I spend god-awful amounts of money in those.
Yeah.
But on so many books. Like,
that's the thing, is you can
you
get
so many. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And my trick for when I enter the genre and when I did go to the thrift store was look for the ones with the most cracked spines, because the most people read them and probably love them.
That's
so
true.
like all the ones, like my Bridgerton one, like the spine is like falling apart, and that's the only reason I got it. Like I didn't know what a step back was. It has one. It was one of the only original ones I ever had before this whole thing and my addiction got to a real bad level.
We went on a deep tangent, which is valid and happens all the time.
2 hours.
However, I would like to, before we wrap up, bring up, number one, there's one note on my list that I just wanted to mention really quickly, and it is tag yourself, I'm the resident lunatic. We don't have to discuss the resident lunatic. I just think that is the funniest bit.
I adored that scene. Like, so much.
He was like, it's a gothic castle, obviously.
Who were I think I definitely, can you give me like roughly a page number for where that was, just so I can try to find it?
Let me search it. Because
there's no rhyme or reason to my tab. Oh no, I found it.
Oh,
page 212.
Perfect. I love the resident lunatic. It was just a really small like moment where she was like, everything did not go fine. They were getting chased through the halls by this mad woman in the attic, and then the mad woman is an actress that was hired. Relatable.
We also have a mysterious Scarface man lurking in the cellar, the famous medium.
I was going to say, if I had to tag myself, I think I'd be Mrs. Zhu, who comes in quarterly to refresh our ghosts. Like, I think that's the vibe I want. Like, it reminds me of Pleasance. Like, to get to, like, to come in, yell at the ghosts, and then leave. And, like, that feels like the vibe I want. I don't know that I could be the resident lunatic all the time, and, like, the mysterious Scarface man who lurks in the cellar. Like, I think I'd get cold. But to be a medium who comes in, summons the ghosts, and then goes home for a couple of it, like, that feels like an appropriate vibe for me if I had to tag myself as one of the three.
That's so fair.
Yeah. Which I think Hannah leaves you as the Scarface man, if you're down with that.
I'll embrace it.
If we each get one, that's where we're at.
I'll make sure there's a lot of wine in the cellar, and I'll have a real good time.
Just make sure you don't get bricked up.
That is true.
It's important.
Very true.
Look at us, literary references.
I have more notes that I have to touch on before we wrap up. Number 2, have either of you watched Bluey?
No.
Okay.
No, but I hosted a kids event for it, so I know a tiny bit.
Bluey, I have many nibblings, and all of the nibblings and my brothers and sisters-in-law love Bluey. Bluey is a hilarious children's show. It's Australian. It's a family of dogs, and the 2 little kids are always playing make-believe with their parents, and so every episode is them like playing a game with their parents and like learning lessons. It's adorable, also hilarious even for adults. In fact, maybe more so for adults.
That's what I've heard. It's so really funny. Good for parents. Yeah.
It's so good. However, there is an episode where they want their parents to do romance, and so they like set up a little restaurant and make their parents go on a date. Like a first date, and they like serve them, and it's very sweet and romantic. They make this like horrible dish where they just like combined all this random food and gave it to the mom, and she really didn't want to eat it because it's horrific, and they were going to make the kids really sad, so the dad ate the whole thing. And obviously that's the true romance, that he like ate this for her, and then they like go outside and he barfs it all up. It's incredible. But the whole bit throughout this episode is that they're trying to like get them to smoochy kiss, like they want are you doing romance? And there's a bit where they're like, oh, are you gonna be romantic? And all I could think every time somebody in this book was like, ooh, they're being romantic, or we have to be romantic, it was just me in my head going, are you doing romance? Because that was the energy that they brought to it. So that's all. Everybody watch Bluey. That was
been influenced. I'm gonna do it.
I am an influencer.
You are.
Also, I think we have to talk about the fact that there was only one bed and they fought over it and ended up sharing the sofa.
Yes, I specifically tabbed that spot because I was like, only India Holton could, on 2 separate occasions, do the there's only one bed trope and subvert my expectation. Because it's there's 2 beds, but we're gonna push them together and make one bed. And then we're gonna this one,
break it apart.
Then we go into this one and it's there's only one bed. And I'm like, okay, yes, like we're actually getting the trope this time because we subverted it last time. And then they're bicker, and then they're both smushed onto the couch. And I'm like, no fucking way that's how this happened. Like it was so good.
Well,
and I seriously made a note of like, only India Holton could subvert this trope twice and get me twice with this.
Well, and she doesn't even just subvert tropes, like just the way she writes, like I marked it down. One line is that she saw a spark, but it wasn't her life flashing before her eyes. It was a spring in the couch, like catching fire or whatever. There are so many moments in the book where she'll like start a phrase that you know, and then your brain automatically goes to fill it out, because if you see a spark and she's like gonna die because Snodgrass has her in the, you know, up in the air and whatever, you obviously think it's gonna be about her life flashing before her eyes, but then it's because the couch is like on fire or whatever was happening. Her writing is just so fascinating, and I've said it before, like if I was ever to write a romance, I would need to read for like several more years because there's just so much more to learn. But hers would be one that I would have to just like do a deep dive on, because her writing is so good, just how she crafts everything.
She has
like
a mastery of language that's like mind-blowing.
It's absurd, and I'm just so happy that these books exist, because they do so much in like 300 pages.
Right. Well, even that sentence, we were talking about it earlier, but it's right at the beginning, and Alice is like, she too had to admit that she was dull. All she wanted to do right now was go home and spend some quality time with a good dictionary. And when you're reading it, and it's like, you're thinking curled up with a good book, but even when you're saying it out loud, you're like, quality time with a good dictionary. Like the way it's written is very much like she's just really good with words. And I'd seen other people like even just posting on their story, like I see it's a common thing in reviews for these books, is just like her mastery of language is mind-blowing, and it really is. And these books are like, I agree, like I don't know that this is something I could aspire to, just because I feel like I'm not super witty when I write, but I do think that like from just a craft perspective, these books are fascinating because they're so well constructed, and every word feels so intentional. And it feels like she specifically picked it out of 100 words she could have chosen. She specifically picked this one for a particular reason to make you feel some type of way. Whereas you read other books and you don't notice the word choice, but this, everything feels intentional.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have a lot of thoughts about that.
No, I too, like it's just, I mean, we've talked about a little bit with the euphemisms too, but just the ones that she thinks up and how she like works them seamlessly into the conversations, and you know, structures the characters' reactions to them. It's just, I mean, they make for fantastic audiobooks too. The narrator is great, Elizabeth Nolden, I think. And this one particularly, just her delivery of some of the lines between Alex and Bigsby was just so fun. And yeah, I just am impressed every time I read them, just how good they are.
Well, then on top of that, like the character work, which is so subtle, I think. Like, especially, it's something that I tend to notice on rereads. Obviously, you notice more on rereads because that's how rereading works. But, like, I mean, it's true in the first one as well, but really, especially in the later two, we talked about, like, kind of pulling away at their layers and seeing the trauma behind it in the, like, more quiet moments and, like, learning about why they are the way they are. I don't, like, it's so subtle and well done, but, like, you know who these characters are.
Yeah.
And then you are still surprised by things about them, you know? Which is, like, she's not the only writer to write good characters.
No.
But her characters, like, have a very specific feel. And also, in the way that, like, each of the books feels very different. I think Hannah and I have talked about this before, but, like, each of the books really, like, obviously her narrative style is the same, and her sense of humor is the same, but each of the books still feels very distinct. And I think it's because they're so character driven, and she's so good at developing these very unique characters that like the characters themselves make the books feel different and influence the style a little bit and influence the overall feeling of the book. Like Alice and Daniel's book, this one feels much more somber. Not like it's still funny and outrageous, but it just feels a little bit more serious especially than like Wisteria Society.
I agree. I think actually this is kind of related. My only like quote criticism of this book specifically is that I didn't get quite as invested in the stakes, and the only reason for that is because Alice and Bixby feel so competent that I had such trust in them from the very beginning that nothing could possibly, like, I was so confident that they would achieve their mission that like I almost couldn't, like, what's it, Snodgrass is like, I'm going to blow up whatever, and I'm like,
right.
No, you're not.
Snodgrass. I was like, this isn't going to go anywhere.
Right? I'm like, no, you're not. And that's
he was so obvious.
Yeah, I think that's, but like even when they're snooping around and they're trying to find who's trying to assassinate the queen, and I'm like, yeah, like do that. But at the same time, I didn't feel kind of the sense of urgency that I thought I maybe should have been feeling, purely because I was like, no matter how this plays out, I have complete faith that these characters are going to solve this. And that being said, I think it kind of just, on the one hand, it's a slight criticism, but really it just kind of also goes to show how, well developed these characters are, that like I had complete trust in them, that I was like, they're so good at what they do. There's no, like, I have complete faith that they will save the world, and like I'm not worried.
I will say I was so intrigued about how they would end up together. Like that's where I was invested, was seeing how they would each get out of Aunt's grip and how they would, you know, come together at the end. Like, again, like I wasn't, because you knew Snodgrass, just how he was, like he was probably going to be a villain. I will say the whole trying to murder Cecilia thing, that surprised me. I did not track the one person trying to do all the things to her, and then she came with the baby, and then however that worked, I don't really know. But yeah, I was mainly thinking just like, how are they going to get together at the end, and like how is that going to function and happen, and how are they going to escape, basically. And they really did have to escape.
I was going to say, I think my sense of urgency, that's why, like, to me, the climax is not Snodgrass. All of that was kind of a secondary plot to me, just for fun. The climax was them fighting off Aunt at the end. Because my sense, that was where my sense of urgency kicked in, was like when they're sat down separately and like basically threatened subliminally, subtly, and just like, oh, because you're a good agent and you're gonna move on and do exactly what we tell you to do. Like that was where my heart rate started picking up. That's a scary scene, by the way, with the therapist.
That was tense.
That was
a frightening,
scary scene.
And then taking the books, and it was just, I think that's why I felt so much in that last 25%, especially of just like why it hit so hard when they were able to be together, and how they each chose to overcome that, and like how differently they both went about it. I think that's a great point, because I was wondering like why, like it was a really slow build of me just like getting absolutely devastated by this book. I don't know, because like the beginning was fun and like, you know, whatever, and then it just slowly rips away at your heart.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think because when I'm in like the middle bit of the book, I just remember thinking to myself, I'm picking this up because I'm invested in Alice and Bixby, and I want to see these scenes of them and the romance and whatever, but I'm not super invested in the plot. But then the further we get and the more we're learning about them, and you have this like Aunt as a threat, you know it the entire time, but it really sneaks up on you.
Yeah,
and then it's like Snodgrass is gone, and you have this moment of like, oh, we're done. And then you have that interrogation scene. And it's like, boom, okay, shit, like this is the threat. This whole time, this has been the threat.
Exactly.
And it hits.
Because Lady Armitage in the last two books, she was over the top and comical. And, you know, obviously she was trying to kill him. But like, she was such a hilarious character in itself. Like, she wasn't scary. She wasn't like a threat to my well-being. But Aunt was so just really, because I mean, I think you can like see parallels and stuff in like other pieces of media that you've seen, and you know that kind of feeling. And
it's like the big bad, and you can translate it can be metaphorical for society itself in terms of like forcing them into.
Well, the whole trilogy has been about these women breaking free of society's restrictions, and you have these human representations of the aunts. And even like as the books go on, Darlington becomes more and more comical and more sympathetic, because you're kind of pitting her against these worse aunts. But I like how in the epilogue, Cecilia says something about how she still is kind of unpacking her childhood as well. Even though like you like Darlington and she becomes more and more endearing as the books go on, it's good to have that reminder of like, she was not a perfect guardian either. But then you've got Aunt as an organization, and it kind of culminates all of that. Like, this is the oppressive thing that's not only attacking Alice and Bixby, but it's trying to eliminate witches. It's trying to eliminate pirates. Like, it is the big bad. And it's true that like once you get to that bit and you realize all the other stuff was kind of misleading you, or kind of trying to distract you from the real problem. And then I didn't tab from literally, they sit down with Aunt and I barely tab until the epilogue, because by that point I was just reading. Like I just couldn't put it down, because that was, I didn't even really think of that until you said it, but that is when the urgency kicked in for me too. I wasn't analyzing, I wasn't taking notes, I wasn't tabbing, I was just in it, because I needed to know how they were going to find their way back to each other.
Well, in each of the books, I think, talking about like the aunts as the manifestation of the thing that is holding them back, each of the books, I think, has this like the plot that you think is the plot.
Yeah.
And you get through it, and the what's his name that loves the Brontes? I can't remember.
I don't know his name either.
Morbath, like his thing like explodes in the sky, and you're like, oh, I guess we're done with the plot. Why is there so much book left? And the rest of the book is Ned and Cecilia hooking up, and then Cecilia going back to her life and trying to get into the Wisteria Society, and Darlington being the one that won't let her in, which ultimately is a good thing and is done out of love. But like the real climax of that book is at the tail end, and Cecilia choosing to not join the Wisteria Society and instead to leave and do her thing. And then you have Alex and Lottie, who have their whole plot with the amulet and Armitage and everything. But the real climax of that book is with Plim, Judith, the aunt.
Yeah.
Well, and the witch hunter also. Which
that
was hilarious.
Which is
oh
hilarious.
My God, that scene.
Right. But so like ultimate, it's Lottie choosing to leave that life.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just on a much larger scale. The like societal aunt.
Yeah.
Or like the Secret Service, rather than like choosing to step away from an individual.
Yeah. Well, it's also, each book, like in the first one, it's like Darlington, but it's also like the Wisteria Society as a whole that you're realizing is like the problem for Cecilia specifically. And Darlington,
Charlotte with the witches.
Yeah. And like, so Darlington gives Cecilia the push that she needs. But then with the witches, Alex kind of needs to be there. Like Charlotte chooses to leave, but then Alex and Charlotte, like it's the two of them together where Alex is like, I'm kidnapping her. Like, because this is the only socially acceptable way for her to get out without completely severing ties to her family. I'm taking her.
Right.
And it's very much her choice, but it's like having that sort of help. And then in this one, because the thread is bigger, you just need a little bit more help. So you have Ned and Cecilia and Alex and Charlotte just helping them get out, because escaping from one aunt versus an organization of aunts versus this whole secret network of aunts, you just need, and each book you have more support and you have more help. And I just love, because these books, you don't feel like they spend a ton of time building this community and these relationships between the three characters, except for the three men. But then you get to the epilogue and you're like, no, these women are like, because you have a couple of scenes in each book, but you get to that epilogue and you're like, this makes sense. They're sitting there and they're like a coven together, and you're like, yes, this feels
just flying off
perfectly right. Yeah.
Which brings us to the epilogue finally. That we
we made it.
And look at us. We in a sequential sequence of events.
We did it. Which brings me to
in a tight 2.5 hours.
My actual favorite line, I think, of the series, which is in the epilogue when it's 3 wicked women who had run away from who they were supposed to be and found each other, 3 wild women holding hands, sharing laughter as they dance together in the midnight sky beneath the yellow moon, which just like sums up the whole point of all of the books.
That's the thing, is this epilogue isn't just an ending to this book. It's an ending to the series, and it gives you an ending for each of the characters.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
Exactly.
But it's like, it really does hit, because everybody's getting a resolution, and you're having that moment of tying up. These women had these parallel journeys, and I genuinely teared up as you were reading that. I was like, oh my God, I just want to fly in the moonlight with like my coven of witches and all of us being together supporting each other.
I did cry when they like started flying.
Oh yeah.
I was like, time to weep.
And I think it's only like 2 months in the future. Because the epilogues that always like kill me, it's like something 16 months. Okay, so
I was
gonna say they've had a baby.
They have a baby. Like there are several kids have happened.
There was another book that I just read that was 2 weeks or months, and who knows what that one was. But it's normally the epilogues that really destroy me that are like 30 years in the future or like very far down the line. But this one was rare in the fact that like it wasn't one of those that has to have like entire lives spanning. It was just 16 months.
But it like alludes
months.
to
exactly the future and everything.
Mm. Like, you know that this is now how it is.
And Bixby's
this is how
kid
it will
just,
be.
like, yeah, and like their baby like mimicking him, like the little
Stop.
puff, and he was like,
Stop.
I know.
Stop I'm trash. This is very heterosexual of me. I am very trash for men with their babies.
Me too.
There is so like the bit where Alex like sees Bixby with the baby and then immediately goes to just like moon over his own children.
Yes.
And Ned is like, who would have thought he'd be such a sap? And Daniel's like, he's always
of course,
what are you talking about? Always been a sap. What do you mean?
This is not new information.
Yeah.
And then you've still got like the romance between Bixby and Alice, and how he can see she's getting overstimulated, and then he's just like, let's go, it's time. And it's just so sweet. Ugh.
It is like I feel like I don't even have that much to say, just because genuinely I feel like it's a perfect ending.
It is
like a perfect ending.
Well, and also there's the other like giant paragraph that I highlighted is a passage about how Alice and Daniel's like inner children, essentially, like they still are, they have ghosts is the phrases that she used. Oh, there's a bit young Daniel who had learned so thoroughly not to flinch that even now he never noticed when he accidentally burned a finger and was confused when Alice cared about it. But then going on to say like that they know how to help each other, and every day the ghosts grew a little fainter, which is I think the perfect way. Like, we're not super far in the future, they're not over it, but like you can see that it's on the up and up. Like, they're getting better and everything is okay now, even though it's not completely fixed.
Yeah, it might not ever be fixed, but the fact that they're going to be there to help each other through that and make that weight a little bit lighter every single day for the rest of their lives, like that hits so hard, because it's just the promise of recovery.
Right.
And the promise of community and all of that.
And the fact that they're all together, you know, like a lot of like even Elizabeth Everett series, like there's always one couple that's kind of away. So like in book 2, like the first couple has to go away, and then you have book 2, and then in book 3, book 2's couple is gone, and then you kind of have like book 1's couple back. In this one, they're all, you know, like book 1 and book 2 you have book 1's couple, and then this one you have everyone, and then their epilogue is all together. And I just love how they stay, and you can tell that they're friends, and then they're going to be in each other's lives forever, because obviously some, you know, there's like a Joanna Shupe series where the one friend has to go to England because she marries a duke, and the rest are in like New York. And obviously they're still friends, but like life, and you get separated and you have to keep contact in different ways. But this one is just such the fantasy of just being able to stay with your best friends and your family all like at all times.
In particular, because you have flying houses, and
exactly,
it makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, you can just like, oh, you're gonna go burglarize that place on Tuesday. Good luck with that.
As they were giving the security tips, I thought that was fabulous.
Oh, also, Evie's proclivity for cleaning. Like, just the influence that they all clearly have on each other's children, because they clearly spend so much time together, that she's like, oh, I can clean it up. And Ned is like, who did this?
Who did this to my child?
Who corrupted my child?
And again, like, I will never be able to write like this, but if there was a devil standing in front of me and it wasn't like a erotic devil, he didn't want to like have sex with me like all the time, and if he just wanted to like give me a wish to sell my soul, it would be to be able to write like India Holton. It's just so fascinating when you just obviously like try to reread and really pick apart what's happening and how she structures
it's like
everything.
Every sentence.
Yeah.
There's something to say.
Everyone. Like, you could highlight the entire book.
That's the thing is, I feel like if I wanted to, and if I had unlimited tabs, there would be tabs per page. Like, the tab to page ratio would be absurd. The book would weigh 4 extra pounds because of all the tabbing. And like, I feel like it's not that funny. Sorry, but like,
no, it's just that like I will highlight on all over a page, and then I have to be like, do I need to like? Is this a tab that I need? Like, is it a thing I need to refer back to, or is the highlight enough? And I'll save it and tab something else.
See, because I only tab, this is why I have such a hard time when we're talking. I can't find anything because there's no rhyme or reason to my tabs. So I just have to flip through all 95 tabs and figure out which one is the one I want to reference.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's just something so magical about these books. I'm like,
literally.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever read anything that's like captured that same type of magic, but I do feel like these books have opened me up to a lot of other books that have just given me different things, whether it's historical romance as a genre, or that lady scientist studies magical things, or like XYZ books that I was like, no, that's outside of my comfort zone. I'm not going to touch it. I was like, well, I didn't expect to really even like this book. And these are some of my favorite 3 books that I've read in the last 3 years, if not my favorite 3 books that I've read in the last 3 years.
And then I kept getting surprised how much I loved the next book.
Yes.
Like, I loved book 1, but I just didn't expect to love book 2 the way I loved it. And then because I loved book 2 so much, I didn't expect to love book 3 the way I loved it. And I still think book 2 is my favorite, like if I had to choose. But like I was still just so surprised.
And
why was I surprised?
I couldn't rank, like, I think League of Gentlewomen Witches is my favorite of the 3. But I could not choose whether it was Wisteria Society or Secret Service. Like, I couldn't choose between those 2 which one I liked better. Like, I don't think I could pick. And I think that, like, Wisteria Society has a special place in my heart because it introduced me to this world. Secret Service has a special place in my heart because it wrapped everything up so incredibly beautifully. Like, I feel like they each did something different, and so they all hold like a different piece. And like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like they're just so spectacular. I'm sorry, and I don't know that we're winding down, but I feel like we might be sort of winding down. And before we do, I need to say that this is very off topic, but I'm like, I feel like
but that's on brand.
Amazing. So I'm like, I feel like we're in the epilogue now, and I don't want to I need to pull us all the way out of that and go back to the middle of the book. But the scene where what's her name is trying to assassinate Cecilia, and then all the pirates are in there. And
which Cecilia pulls up holding a baby in one hand and a gun in the other. Which is bad.
Which is, if I could have that tattooed on my person, I would. Like, that particular image of like baby gun would be
Cecilia actually is who I aspire to be in that moment,
right?
In my fantasy world.
But it's just when the pirates are all there and they're like, Charlotte, dear, as a witch, we need to hunt you for sport now. How much free time would you like? And the fact that she's considering it, and Alex like chucks her over his shoulder, pulls out a sword, and disappears into the wall is like the funniest image in my like. That scene, and then the fact that then they turned the spies and they're like, how much? And then Bixby goes, we'll take 10 minutes, and they bolt. Like, it's, but just the fact that Charlotte is considering it, Alex has to physically lift her, pull a sword, and run away. I was like,
well, and then also in the epilogue, there's a mention of like Charlotte looks more piratical than anyone else. Like in her spike.
I love her evolution.
There's something about that I genuinely think I need to reread these books and sit with that in particular, because like Cecilia was a pirate and she's escaped that. So she's not quite a pirate anymore. She's something else. And she's this evolution of the pirate princess, and that's why people fear her, because she's not a pirate. Charlotte was a witch who has somehow become peak pirate.
Yeah.
And Alice is, I don't know what Alice is. Like, I feel like I don't even know that she knows what she is. Like,
Alice just is.
She's just Alice. And I love it. But I think there's something about Charlotte's journey, because I've only read League and Secret Service once each. And there's something, I need to sit down and read the series, read the trilogy all in one go.
Yeah.
But there's something about Charlotte's journey, and that, for whatever reason, that line stuck to me, that right at the end, they're like, she was the most piratical of all of them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, something about that hits me in a way that I can't quite put into words, and I need to like sit with it longer and figure out why it hits me the way it does.
Because she was so, like just
repressed,
her book.
Almost?
Yeah, repressed, and her repression, and then how she got out of that, just obviously like the entire span of the second book. And her roles in this one, and how she like manages Alex and how she does all that is just so fascinating. And then, picking up on the fact that she's the most piratical. I mean, I just love her.
Well, I think she and Charlotte had very different, like, hers was freedom is what she was really seeking throughout her book and achieved it, versus Alice, also was looking for freedom, but it was more like she wanted family. she wanted what she ended up getting, which, and they talk about how she has always been like hugging books and dreaming of having a family.
Yeah.
Is like that's the thing that she was reaching for, and so hers has a like no less poignant but quieter result, I think, of like just her and Daniel like living their life and having their little organization where they go and help people, but like Charlotte was seeking some kind of grander, on the surface anyway, freedom, versus Alice is looking for just like family and security.
Yeah,
because she also had all that power, Charlotte, with managing her power and like having so much of it, and then finally being able to either sometimes let it control her and control it, and like express that finally, because she's, I mean, like in any like YA, you've got like the chosen one, and it's kind of in this one Charlotte with her, supreme witchy powers, and truly like embracing that.
Well, it's almost like Cecilia's journey was to be seen by the people she loves as herself and not as her mother. So for that's being not a pirate but something else. For Charlotte, it's freedom from any sort of restriction, which means going full pirate. Right. And for Alice, it's family and community, and just people that will love her unconditionally, and just that freedom to find her true self and embrace her true self, whether it is piratical or witchy or assassiny, just sort of the freedom to be whoever she is.
Well, outside of an organization, because she spent her whole life being told who she is by an organization who has formed her into what they want her to be. So it makes sense that she would have to find herself outside of any kind of organization.
Yeah, like in a way that we can't quantify quite as easily as the other two.
And this conversation is so enlightening just to me, because like when I was reading like the Secret Service of Teen Treason for the first time, I really couldn't pinpoint what was so different between the different like arcs and stories. And I think you just summed it up perfectly. Like how obviously the books, like they all have her style, but those different like touch points. That's what I was looking for when I was like trying to figure it out for my review. I was like, I don't freaking know. So that's a great
just had to
way
talk
of explaining
through it to figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
I couldn't have the words for it.
No,
that's
so
something.
Thank you so much.
I always find that I need to talk to figure out what I'm thinking, and it's not something that I, like you don't find the words until you're bouncing off of other people, and so somebody saying, well, this is what Alice wants, helps me put together, okay, well then if that's what Alice wants, then this is what Cecilia. I'm like, I don't know, I like conversations like this because they help me, and also like they make me see things like I wouldn't have seen the like this is stupid, but in the first two books I didn't think really critically about how the two aunts were different until Caroline and I were talking, and then you had mentioned you went into a pretty impressive kind of analysis of the two aunts and what they represented, and I was like, oh my god, like I was like taking notes. I was like, this is fascinating, like this is, but it pushed me to think differently, and that's why, like, especially for this series, because I always know that having finished reading it, I'm like, I guarantee you there's like 80% here that I haven't caught yet.
Yes.
And if I can talk about it with people, I'm going to uncover a lot more of that. And I think that these books, like, I feel like the ending is hitting me like 30% harder now that we've said that out loud, what each of their journeys were. And these three women flying off into the night, and like how each of them has had that moment where they want to fly and like getting to do that. Like it just hits in like such a good way. God, I love these books. Jesus.
I know. And also, just because I don't think we've really noted it, Caroline and I talked about it in some other episode, I don't know, just how fun the like fake marriage was, in like kind of reversing like the fake dating. That everyone assumes they're sleeping together and that they're married and they should have all this passion, so then having to like work through that. I just find that to be such a fun trope in this book. And I prefer it honestly over the fake dating. Yeah.
The fact that they're constantly holding hands and they don't even realize it. I fucking love that. Every time somebody will like look at them and they'll realize they're holding hands and be like, like, oh, I forgot we were doing that. It's like, I love that. And
it was just such a fun like romance moment of just like them having to pretend to be married. I'll think about that a lot just because it, fake dating is not necessarily one of my favorite tropes. But I sure do love this fake marriage. People assuming they're like getting freaky in the sheets. And then
also everybody being like, bro, Daniel's hot.
Right?
They're like, oh, your husband? Fine.
They're like, God, your husband's hot, and Alice is like, he does look a little bit warm. You're right. Like,
yeah. Well, and then he
put him near a window. Like,
and then he's like, Alice, you're so hot, and she's like, whoa, well, look at that, and he's like, no,
also,
like
Alice is absolutely
like, on fire.
thirsting for him. Like, there's a bit where she like notices his ass.
Yes.
It takes me out.
She wants to like take a bite out of it or something.
Yeah, well, because she remembers Darlington saying something about having teeth in her gluteus maximus.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she was like, I would like
his gluteus maximus.
Yeah, she's like, I would like to bite that ass.
Same, Alice. Same.
She
so good.
And just their sex scene, or the first one, like in that, like after they escape and
in the weird
that,
like art
secluded
studio.
Yeah. It was just so much fun.
She's so thirsty for him, and I respect that.
And again, I just love that whole dynamic of like, hold me tightly, so I like, because I will try to kill you, and just like I won't let, and just the fact that he like completely met her where she was in terms of what she wanted and what she needed. I don't know.
All of the heroes in this series do that in their sex scenes, are really good at meeting the heroine where she's at in the sex scenes.
But each book, they've also got like a completely different like dynamic sexually. And I just found it really, like, especially this one in comparison to Charlotte and Alex, like Charlotte was really dominant and she really liked being in charge. And in this one, Alice is like, oh my God, finally somebody else will take charge and I can relax. And like, I don't need to worry about hurting him because he is more than a match for me. Like, I just like how each of them was completely different, because sometimes when you're reading romance books if it's several by the same author, you can start to notice like similarities in terms of like relationship dynamics. But each of these was so completely different, and it was really fascinating to kind of see that.
And again, back to your point of the other ones being like opposites attract and kind of like, not necessarily enemies, I guess, but this one, they're so similar from the beginning, and they have like the parallel kind of journeys and then like the different points where they diverge. I want to see more of that. Like, I want to see more authors like play with two characters who are so evenly matched in that sense, and then what they can do with that within the novel, because there are just so many more opposites attracts than there are like this dynamic.
I think it's harder to write similar characters who don't come off as the same,
which is so impressive.
Right. Well, I think it's how you end up with like these are really more rivals to love. Well, I mean, even then they aren't like really rivals, but they have that like kind of academic or like, I'm the best type mentality. And so I think like that feels like the difference between rivals to lovers and enemies. Like, I would classify Charlotte and Alex also weren't ever really enemies, but like, that feels more enemies to lovers versus this one is rivals. Like, they're on the same side. They have very similar skill sets.
Yeah. They have a very specific set of skills. I've been wanting to say that for 3 hours. I was like, I need to work that into the conversation.
Mission accomplished.
Yes, the last time we said that they were similar, I was like, they have a very specific set. I was like, I need to say that at some point. And on that note, we're done. I've peaked. That's the end of
And that's the end of the podcast, everyone. Thanks for listening to this insanely long episode.
Yeah, this will be, I don't know how you edit, but I feel like this will be fun. Although,
Hannah's going to have a time.
I don't know.
We'll include some banter. It'll be fine.
Yeah. I was going to say, I feel like I made some quality quips that I would like to say in.
We got to be careful not to cut the quality quips.
No, there's like half of the first part is just us talking about the podcast. And then the second is talking about the fascinating stuff about your terrible book shipping.
We'll figure it out. Hannah's great at leaving the funny parts.
All of it. Yeah, you can probably cut that.
No, I think that's I probably part of it. We got to keep that because we reference it.
We refer back to it later.
Yeah,
shit,
and that's where I get when I'm editing. There'll be something I'm thinking, oh yeah, I can cut that out, and then we talk about it 10 times. I'm like, well, shit, I sure can't get rid of that.
I believe in you.
It's like how you can't cut all the Twilight nonsense because you bring it up again later, and also because in a future episode we can refer back to it. Exactly. We're building the universe, right? Like, it's
so true.
I think it would be fun and fascinating for us to all watch Twilight and give commentary. I
have been wanting to do movie commentaries literally for a million years, and I just don't know how to edit it. So I would genuinely be all over that. Like, I would love to do something like that if you guys are ever interested.
We'll figure it out because I want to do that with Much Ado About Nothing.
I want to do it with... I would do it for Much Ado, too.
I genuinely... And I've never seen it. But I have a list of...
The After Hours episodes is actually just going to turn into movie commentary.
I would love that.
I would love that.
All right, well...
I'm sorry, I know I'm not part of this, but, like, guest appearances, I would like...
Please, no, be part of it.
Mission accomplished. It's too late. You are now.
You are part of it.
We love guest appearances.
Seriously, I would love that. I've had a ton of fun today. I've been wanting to talk books in this kind of setting for a really long time, so this was fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, this was great.
I've loved everything that we've talked about.
We, other than the old school episodes, have barely touched on what our other episodes are going to be. So if at any point you're like, I just read this historical romance and I think that you should do an episode on it.
I will keep you posted.
We've got like our entire rest of the season open for like all of our non-old school ones.
Amazing.
And like that's like, obviously we had the whole conversation about, you know, the different cover trends and stuff. And that's what I love about the guests is that obviously it's not like specifically related, or it's tangentially related to like, you know, Secret Service of Teen Treason, but it's just picking people's brains about, you know, their different journey of like getting into romance. And
because I think what prompted it is like, what prompted it was like, Dangerous Damsels was your first historical romance. Like that's kind of an interesting place to start. And then that kind of led into like my whole
interestingly, we had the same, not the same discussion, but the same like illustrated versus clinch discussion with Elizabeth Everett, who is coming at it from a obviously completely different perspective as a writer. Like a historical romance author. But like the conversations went different directions because you're not Elizabeth Everett and Elizabeth Everett isn't you. Each to your benefit.
Yes, thank you so much. And again, thank you for like clarifying the difference between these three books that
I know. I could not figure out Cecilia's arc. I could tell Alice's and Lottie's. And then I was like stuck on Cecilia because she's kind of an enigma to me. And you came in and was like,
put Alice's into words, so it worked so well.
We worked out all the things.
We got it.
We solved the books.
We did. We've cracked it. They've been fully analyzed.
We didn't touch on the heroes' arcs, but I think that's because they don't matter as much.
Yeah.
I do love the men. I love the men in these books, but
they are Kens.
They are Kens.
They're just Kens.
Yes.
Like, do you have an arc? Yes, but this isn't about you. Actually, fully Ned is a Ken, and he supports that. I think that Ned would be the first to self-identify as a Ken.
Yeah.
I think he would. Alex, I think, would resist it a little bit. And Bixby just wouldn't really be a huge fan of this sort of classification.
He'd be like, what are you?
That's true. Bixby wouldn't know what we were talking about.
Yeah, no, Bixby wouldn't know. Alex would be like, I'm absolutely not a Ken, but then...
But he would like feel it deep in his soul.
Yeah.
He would get there eventually. Like, Charlotte would give him a look, and he'd be like, oh shit, I am a Ken.
But Ned, however, would start the conversation.
Ned would walk in.
Ned would be like, guys, I'm a Ken.
Right? He'd walk in and be like, hello, Kens. Another Ken is talking. Like, that would be the vibe.
India Holton, PSA, you need to write a bonus story.
About the Kens.
I actually do. Yeah. I would love the energy of a story just about, like, Ned, Alex, and Bixby on an outing, which we got kind of in League. There's the bit where they, like, all the women fly off to go save the day, and Ned is like, oh, yeah, Cecilia knows not to run off without me, and Alex is, like, watching Cecilia fly up, and he's like, uh-huh. Okay. That energy, but like a short story of just them, probably with their children, because I think that would be hilarious. Like the bit we got in the epilogue, but longer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And also starting with Ned walking in and saying, listen up, Ken's another Ken is talking.
And they're all babysitting. Like the women are on like a crime mission to just do crime. And all the men are just at home with the kids. Like, oh God.
And they end up on shenanigans of their own, obviously. Yeah. Because they have to.
Yeah.
This is how we started writing fan fiction. This is going to be our origin story. India Holton fan fiction.
The nichest market out there.
It's so small.
We've claimed it. We've got the corner on it.
The people who read it are each other.
And you know what? It's okay.
That's all you need.
She's everything, and we're just Kens.
And we're just Kens. India is everything, and we're just Kens.
Truly.
I do think that Ned is synonymous, though. We could honestly be like, she's everything, and he's just Ned. And
it even has the...
Ned and Ken are literally the same name.
Got the eh.
I really can't recover from that parallel now that I'm thinking about it.
Ken. We love a slant rhyme. Ned and Ken.
You're the worst.
I love it.
She's everything. He's just Ned.
That is literally what Wisteria Society is.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, this has been great. Stay tuned for our Twilight watch along / drunkenly you telling me the plot.
After dark.
Twilight After Dark. Oh. Tempt me with Twilight.
God.
Oh. All right.
All right, now, just how do I get out of here? Do I just exit?